Welcome back, people, to another episode of My Third Eye. Tonight, I have a returning guest. We hinted at it on an earlier episode. I have Alan Denany back, coming in all the way from across the pond. He's going to be sharing his work that he's been doing for close to well over a year, maybe even closer to 2 years at this point. Uh, it's called The Lines of Destiny. So everything that you've been told about history, you might as well just take it, throw it out the window, because you're in for a ride and a mind blowing experience of truth. So, having said that, I will turn this now over to Alan and let him introduce himself, and we'll get started.
Hi, Ghost. Thanks for inviting me on. As I say, I know you a long time chatting on our Telegram group, which I've really enjoyed. And I guess you've shared this journey of discovery with me. So it all began last January 2020. I was sitting down in England. I live just outside London and in the home counties, and I have two sons. My oldest son, he was born in Ireland. So I was born in Ireland myself, originally from the northwest. Um, and of course, he left when he was a baby or child, as his brother. And one night they were watching telly. He came over, and I says, "Well, do you want to see some old megaliths in Ireland? They're older even than Stonehenge," because I knew he had been looking at them at school. So I said, I'd show him one that's would blow his mind a little bit on what they were able to do all those years ago. And I guess that's how the story began, really. And I ended up on a journey which you've shared along the way. And yeah, to say it opened my eyes. It opened many eyes. And I guess this is what you're all going to hear now. So I suppose I can share my screen and tell you how it all began.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
let's do it.
no worries. So just bear with me. Uh,
Yeah,
so
I, I know the very first time watching this presentation in its infancy, um, before where it has come today, I know how mind blowing it was, and how and the questions I had, and the conversations that you and I had after for months and months and months, and then you'd find different things, and it would just grow and grow and grow, and like I said, I'm super excited that you're finally here to tell this. When I first started my podcast originally, I wanted you on as my first guest, but I'm glad we did wait so I could work out some bugs on my end, which I will always be working on bugs on my end, with audio and everything else. But you know, I just I, I was looking forward to this since you know Friday night when you were like, yeah, let's record on Sunday, and like we'll get this out
yeah,
there.
I've been looking forward to this one. As I say, I've only got to tell a few people, mostly Telegram groups, and I did share it with Michael Tazarian. And I guess even since then, it's the rate of knowledge I've picked up even in a short time. Um, so I'm delighted. I always had this year marked. I said I love your show so far, Ghost, and this, yeah, I think I was earmarked it to share with you and your audience.
Thank you.
So no worries at all. So there's a map, the Isles of Wonder, and I guess the story I'll tell you will make you probably think the same. Again, I live just maybe an hour or so outside London. You see down there in England, but I grew up just on the southern side of the border with Northern Ireland up around here, and I guess um, I was interested to share this with my son. So basically, there we zoomed into Dublin, and just about half an hour's drive north of Dublin on the east coast in the province of Leinster. Ireland is split into 4 provinces. You have Ulster, Munster, Leinster, and Connacht. And in Leinster, north of Leinster, in Meath, County Meath, you have what's called the Brún na Boine, and it's just about half an hour's drive, say, north of Dublin. And it's quite a unique place. It's a World Heritage Site. I think 2/3 of world megalithic art is in that picture you see right there. It's on the River Boyne, and it's like in the horseshoe. It just flows into the Irish Sea off to the east, not far away. And you can see there's many, many passage tombs and Neolithic monuments and tombs that are really quite special. And the art, we all know the traditional Celtic art is quite something to see. So in the center of that horseshoe, you have what's called Brún na Boine, and it's an ancient legend. Basically, the palace on the Boyne is what it means, and it's where um, locals before the rediscovery of these tombs knew of the legends which span eons, and these were built possibly maybe 3,300 BC, from 3,500 3,300 BC. And there you have 3 main pieces, and there's the first one is Nowth. And Nowth itself, I think, has 1/3 of all European art, Mesolithic or Neolithic art, um, on it. Just one passage tomb, and a passage tomb is basically you have a tunnel into the middle of a mound. And that's the best way to describe a passage tomb. Um, and this one is Nowth. There's about 14 individual mounds, and the artwork and the curbstones around and the chambers inside. This one has 2 chambers from opposite ends, like one over the other. And that's on the west. On the northeast side, then you have Dowth, and unfortunately, that was badly excavated by amateur archaeologists in the early 19th century, and they did a lot of damage. But I was fortunate enough to visit it this August past, and there's quite a lot still to see there that is makes it quite fascinating. There's on each of the arms there that's dug through, there is 2 passages deep into it on each side, and the curbstones around there is some artwork on those too that's fascinating and gives you an idea of possibly what they were thinking about. And then I guess the most famous of them all in the middle is Newgrange. And Newgrange wasn't, it was Brún na Boine was the original folklore name. And basically it's a massive mound. It's about maybe 15 meters high. It's about maybe 90 meters in diameter, and there's about 200,000 tons of stone in it, of rock and stone. And some of them are upwards of 100 ton. And some of the stone came from the south 60 miles and 70 miles to the north. And some of the stones, I say, the heavier ones came from about 30 miles away. I'd say mostly by water, but some by obviously ground. Um, and the reason all of these is, we have our PlayStations, our Netflix and Amazon Prime, the movies, we've all the entertainment of the day, our smartphones and so on. But back then, they literally had nothing. They didn't, it was the Stone Age, and they didn't have musical instruments that we recognize much, maybe basic things. And so their only entertainment was staring at the stars. And the stories and the imagination ran wild. And I guess over Ireland, which this is the Milky Way is seen from the northwest, is quite breathtaking. Of course, you don't have the light pollution you have today, like some cities have, but you could see clearly how dominant, and I guess their imaginations were fueled. And the better the story, the better tradition, the more amazing it was. Now, Newgrange, as I say, dated back to about 3,300 BC when it was complete. It probably started much before that, maybe from 3,500 BC. And as I say, these people that built it were farming people, and they arrived in Ireland sometime around 4,800 or 5,000 BC. But there was people in Ireland, I guess, from about, you had the Ice Age, the Great Ice Age, and so most of the northern hemisphere, at least north of Spain, upwards of Ireland, was covered in ice. And just to the west of Newgrange, maybe 3 kilometers deep, or nearly over 2 miles deep of ice. That's a lot of ice, and that melted about 11,000 BC. Um, and you were able to, I guess, at that point, you could have walked from Ireland onto the mainland continent. England separated, first Ireland separated from England around, I'd say about 11,000 BC, and England separated about 8,000 BC from the continent of France. And they were farming people, and they built this, I guess, to honor the sun. And what's so special about Newgrange is that over the main entrance you have a door, and you see you have to pass this stone, which is about 3.5 meters wide, and it's quite a famous. And when you think of all the ancient artwork in prehistoric times, you think of this stone. You see the triple spirals and double spirals. And you cross over steps, and then you can see the passage door entrance, which was efficient or economic in design, because you really do have to squeeze your way up. And over the top, you see a square, and that's called a roof box. And on the shortest day of the year, the light will shine into that on the 21st of December at dawn as the sun rises. Just for about 15-20 minutes, the light comes through. Now you can see it wasn't like this. In fact, it was rediscovered, I guess, in the 17th or 16th, 17th century. The workers were going to rob the stone to build a manor, or told to, you take the stone. Once they uncovered the entrance, they ran, because they knew the legends of Brún na Bóinne, and it scared them. So whilst inside was never renovated, it remained perfectly preserved. But the outside, however, took on Dr. Michael O'Kelly did quite extensive work, and this was a photo taken in 1959, but works began from the 60s to 1975. Now, on dawn, you can see the light rise over the opposite hill, over the River Boyne, and if you stand inside, you can see the light come through. Now, there is a lottery, and only about 20 people or so can actually fit inside the tomb. So there's a lottery of maybe 2.5 million people apply. And I guess, being Ireland, the northwest of the of Europe, and on the northeast of the Atlantic, it tends to have lots of wet weather. So maybe 1 in 5 or 10 years, you'll be lucky enough to actually see the sunrise if it's not raining and snowing or something. And it is quite a sight to behold. And the sun comes through that roof box and makes its way up into the back of the chamber. And when you look at the chamber, it's a cruciform inside. So you go up and you have basically, it looks like a cross. And on one of them is a large basin. Now, the significant thing about it is that basin had to have been there before it was built, because it's simply too big. It doesn't fit. And if you see the way it's designed, it had to be one of the first things placed, or it was there before the structure was built at all. And you can see the bottom is a section through it, and how it rises to the middle. And it's quite, you see the way the stones are laid and the rocks inside and boulders. In all that time, 5,500 years or over, who knows, but 5,500 years, not one piece of water has actually made its way in, and it's remained dry in all that time. And so what happens on the shortest day, you can see the path of the sunlight and the solstice. That's about 10 to 9 in the morning. Sun rises and the light makes its way through. And you can see some of the stones in the middle force you to bend, to bow almost in reverence as you make your way back. And it lights up back to the stone basin and so on behind. So it's quite quite an experience, I'd imagine. Say if you're lucky enough to witness it, it must be otherworldly. Um, and how it would have been made is, you see here, they would have maybe got wedges, and they would have created a fracture line and keep inducing it. They could do all this Stone Age, then it would fracture. They probably rolled it in logs. You see, this is, I think, the largest one, monolithic stone that was ever caught in Goblet Tepe, in southern Turkey. You can see that they could carved it out of caverns or rock beds, and then you can see they may have moved it like this on pontoons, probably mostly submerged, and with logs and so on to make ballast to keep it afloat. And there is the Wicklow Mountains to the south. That's about 60 miles south, where some of the quartz came from. Um, and here is an example. Although there's been bog boats, which are basically carved out oak, there has been found reed boats like this one in Puno, and to the west of Newgrange is quite a lot. Again, the Boyne, but there's a massive lakelands with bull reeds and the like. And I'm sure they were definitely seaworthy. In fact, last year was a unique year. They found a quay on the Boyne of large flat rock that basically made a harbour, and there's about maybe 200 feet rise, 150-foot rise from the river up to the to the to Newgrange itself. So they made hard standing to obviously offload the rock they brought and the boulders, and to keep it clean and tidy. Um, and when you look from at Newgrange from above, remember these are the early farmers, and we have the modern trend is what you call biodynamic farming, which essentially is, they think it's trendy and new now, but in fact it was possibly the earliest form of farming there was. And what it means is that they planted and farmed with this lunar cycles. And so Newgrange is in fact probably a replica of the old moon. And the old moon is when you sow your crop, and also when you harvest your crop in the old moon. And the quartz stone, when the renovation, um, looked sort of like the old moon in itself. And so the quartz probably lay out on the ground, and something like that. And hence the farming people had something of reverence to go by. Now my son asked me, Dad, how do you know that? So of course, all good journeys start with a good question, and his question, well, it was very simple. How do you know that the sun goes through the tube? I found an app. There's many apps, but this is just the one I found on the day, and it was basically um, uh, suncalc.net, and basically it shows the where the sun rises and where the sun sets. So you see there, the yellow line is where the sun rises on a given day. So you set your date. You see what angle, where to look from your position, the drop pin, and that shows you the sunrise. And the orange line shows you as it makes its way through the sky where the sun will break the horizon and set. And so if you move that drop pin northward or southward, if you move in the winter solstice time, if you move that drop pin northwards, eventually you hit the Arctic Circle, and the angle between the yellow and orange lines will disappear to nothing because it's 24-hour darkness. And of course, as you push towards the equator, that angle flattens out because you will have the sun rising closer to the east and setting closer to the west. So everywhere I'd move that drop pin, has a different angle and a different trajectory. So nowhere is the same in essence. So I set it up and I just dropped it on top of Newgrange, like so. Obviously, it's a crudish enough app, but sufficient to demonstrate where the light comes from. So when it was placed on Newgrange, I showed, and you could see that it pretty much lined up with where the door was. And so my son was satisfied, and being satisfied, got bored, left. But as I was talking to him, about whatever, I was rolling the mouse. I'd done my job, and I was rolling the mouse and talking away to him, just fiddling. And it was just when I looked at it out, it zoomed out, I'd seen the yellow ray was moving towards England. And of course, I've been living in England. I know what I saw shocked me profoundly because I recognized if you know England, you know where the end of the yellow line is. In fact, I had to double check just to be clear to myself. And it sure enough, I seen that it was firing right through Stonehenge, which I'm sure most of your listeners will be aware of. Of course, that could not happen anywhere else. It had to be Newgrange because if you moved it either west or east, it would not line with with Stonehenge. Of course, I'm shocked, but at the same time, I'm rolling the mouse still in my confusion, and I see went straight for Paris. And I thought to myself, we all know there's the Louvre in Paris, where the Mona Lisa is, and all the other things in Paris, wondering where would that go. And as I rolled more, I could see my jaw literally fell on the floor because I could see where it was aiming for. It was going straight for none other than Cairo or Giza. We all know Giza for the pyramids and the Sphinx. And there'd been lots of talk of that. So to see something like this actually manifest to be real blew my mind. But it didn't even stop there. I could see that it continued on and actually went right through Mecca. And we all know Mecca is the Islam center, the Kaaba. And so I was gobsmacked to be honest, because I realized that this line in chronology, the oldest is Newgrange at about, it was completed maybe even before 3300 BC. So it's quite an old monument. Then the next oldest was Stonehenge, and that is about 2700 BC. And then you have the pyramids themselves are 2000 2600 years old. So I said to myself, the first thing I will do is that again, a Kaaba, of course, is about maybe for 500 AD with Muhammad, and so I says I can't prove all that, but if I could prove from Newgrange to Stonehenge, um, and my background is I work with a large civil engineering company, and I've worked all over the world at this stage in Europe, in Africa, and I'm back in England now, and in Ireland, obviously, I've worked there as well. So, and where I grew up, I knew lots of folklore. So obviously, this was fascinating to me. And the first thing I thought, a tradition I did as a child, as it seen just previously, is we used to light bonfires on the longest day of the year, the 21st of June. We used to light a bonfire and we'd look around at all our friends' houses and farms in the distance. And of course, our neighbours always used to light a better fire than we did. Uh, because their dad worked in the lumber yard, so we they had much bigger fire, but we didn't do too bad. But you looked around and you could see everybody's fire. But one thing that I guess that was obvious to me, indeed, the month of May in Irish and Gaelic, the language, the old language of Ireland, is Baltana, which literally means bonfire. And the thing that struck me about bonfires are cairns. You'd see stones on top of mountains where they would have lit them as well, or passage tombs, but they weren't necessarily on top, which meant that the position was more important than the elevation or how high it was. So to me, that was a giveaway that obviously the position was of vital importance. Um, so the next task was obviously the Irish Sea. And so when I looked at the Irish Sea, this is a photo of the Wicklow Mountains, which is the east coast of Ireland, as you see it from Wales across the Irish Sea. Now, it's at the closest points is about 60, 70 miles. And indeed, on the alignment, it is about 70 miles. And you can see clearly there that you can see the mountains on the horizon. And in fact, looking the other way, there's plenty of pictures on the internet to show you can indeed see Wales from Ireland as well, much clearer even on a given day. So there was no doubt with bonfires. I knew with the foot and mouth crisis, there was stacks of, sadly, herds had to be destroyed with foot and mouth. And those smoke columns were seen up to 100 miles away. The heat and the power would have sent them, the column of smoke up very, very high and straight for a long way. So the tech was there to do it. So the first task after working that out was to cross the Irish Sea. And it was at this moment I nearly gave up because I could find no evidence of a cairn on that line. And it really was upsetting for me. Um, so I was about to give up because I couldn't find a way around it. But I noticed just to the north, first of all, there was a little cairn. A cairn is a little mound of stones on the high ground, which used for either they say tombs or burning fires. And I noticed one just to the north, a couple hundred meters of the line. And I then found one analog. I found another one to the south of it. And I remember a saying um, that said, I learned as a kid. I wasn't particularly good at speaking Irish or Gaelic as it's known. I wasn't particularly the best, but I do remember a saying that was Tom Idragá Tina, which obviously it's the way I'm saying it looks nothing like it's written. Idragá Tina means between two fires, and that's basically you're in a dilemma or you've a chosen path. You have to pick a path, and I thought, hang on a minute. So when I measured the distance between them, I found that the line bisected perfectly the two fires. And I thought, I'm onto something here. So straight away, I jumped across the Irish Sea and I tried from Lambay Island, which is just north of Dublin, to the coast there. And it didn't work out perfectly, but I found beside it a tower that were two Montello towers that were perfectly equidistant. And then I threw into question. So if you're familiar with Ireland, and of course the Vikings invaded in about 700 AD, and these round towers were supposed to be built by the monks um, to stop the invasion. What you see is there was a door halfway up, or at least a third of the way up, and there was a ladder. And as soon as they got warning the Vikings were coming, they used to grab all the gold chalices and the Bibles and the children and women, and everyone would go up up the ladder, and they pull the ladder up after them. And the Vikings were very good at many things, but unfortunately, they weren't very good for them at siege warfare. So they became unstuck with the round towers, and so they survived, and so did a lot of the treasures actually. Um, and they were good. But one thing, I lived actually within a mile of this one here, Clondalkin, round tower, and I always noticed all of them had one thing in common, is that the rock and stone on the bottom was a different design, a different detail, and different construction technology. It was mostly dry stone, and all of them, in fact. And I begin to think to myself, these are older, much older. The base is much older than the rest of the tower. And then I thought, well, like all invasions, and Christianity was no different. It came at St. Patrick in 432 AD to Ireland, which I'm sure any of you know the Irish for St. Patrick's Day. Now, they would have taken the pagan bonfire locations and all the other things that they wells and whatever and made it their own and Christianized them. And I guess the round tower basis was no different. And in fact, it's a tricky one to really understand. Um, but so what I did was I downloaded all the round tower positions over Ireland and all the old church towers, round towers, and I started to look at things differently. In fact, there's evidence even down on the other end of the line in Israel and the Middle East and in Egypt had towers and mispas as well, which and the bottom was much older than the top, but they had multi-purposes. So I started plotting. I found cairns and forts and round towers, and as I plotted them out, I seemed to see patterns. and I began to plot my way. In fact, I found uh, two towers were nearly 10 miles apart. Um, and that made me question how the hell did they do this, because I found that it was really accurate and not too different to how we do a first principle set out today. And it was indeed fascinating. As I see, I found maps that from 1830 survey maps, and Ireland was unique, I suppose, in the Royal Surveying Society, or the Ordnance Survey. It was the first country really to be surveyed in depth that way in 1830, and then in the 1850s they continued with Wales, England, and Scotland. So I used to be able to look up maps and see, and I got to the point where I was predicting where forts were or anomalies, and looking in the old maps and finding reference to them. Not all are still there, sadly, but most are. And you could tell by the names. Again, the Irish came into play because Tinna, anything with Tinna in it, the word Tinna means fire or bonfire. Or cairn. Cairn means a cairn, literally another place to light a fire, a fort. All of these were clues, a rath. And when I got to the Welsh side, I was expecting not to find anything, but I was quite flabbergasted to find that it was still plenty of it. And indeed, even in England, with industrial age, world wars, and farming revolutions, and so on, that all of them still remained intact as I plotted through. And so Google Earth was the tool I used, of course, to plot all these. And one of the things you can do is you can actually set the sky end of it, so you can see the sun as it moves through the sky. So you can set the date and time. And when I did that, you can see too, there is the sun rising to the southeast, and the green tall line is Newgrange, and you can see across the Irish Sea and over towards Stonehenge. And as you cross the Irish Sea, there's the peninsula in Wales first, and then there's the mainland Wales, and on to Stonehenge. And I found plenty of these. I didn't just find one grid line, I found parallel grid lines. And that's ingenious, because if you have parallel grid lines, the more lines you have following the same thing to infinity, because that's where the sun is relative, really, the more accurate you are, because you may make a mistake on one line, but if you have many lines, you reduce the error. And they were no different. They knew this, and it's quite remarkable. This system is still adopted today. And I found lines that weren't just to the southeast for sunrise and winter solstice. I found lines and forts and tracked on the map that were going to the the northeast. Now I couldn't, and still until only quite recently, realized what these were. But when I seen the pattern emerge over Newgrange, and I looked at the curbstone, I remembered what this. I'd seen this before. I'd seen it on a curbstone at Newgrange. There it is there. And what they were doing was an as-built, and we do that all over the world today. You do as how you actually constructed it, and dimensions and patterns. And there you can see the diamonds are actually those grid lines. And up here you can see three. So one will be the sun, and the other two would be the fires. There's argument this is Orion belt, but when you look at it, I thought no, actually, because this is probably what they're saying. They're telling you, you have two fires, and you look at the sun in the middle. So I thought the one to the northeast was possibly, this was my first thought, was Cygnus. And Cygnus is the swan constellation, and the main star there is Deneb. And I thought it was it, but it just wasn't working out. But Cygnus is also associated with St. Bridget. And this triggered my thoughts on how they could have done this. So Bridget, St. Bridget, but Bridget was a pagan deity, and she was the shepherdess of the sky, because the constellation of Cygnus is right at the bottom of the Milky Way in the northern hemisphere. And so through the night, it moves around with the Milky Way as it moves through the sky, and hence it got the name of the shepherdess, or the Saint Bridget. But that triggered me as how, because remember, you're in the Stone Age. So how did they line these two fires? How did they make them equidistant either side of the line? And I thought to myself, it was something that triggered me when, as a kid, on the 1st of February, which was St. Bridget's Day, um, we went and you either got reeds or the plant was rushes, which would be in marshland, and you took them and you made a St. Bridget's cross. And the genius of it was that you got reeds are all the same length, and you cut them the same length, and you folded them in half, and then you started to wind them around each other in a circle and continued around in a spiral. And so what you ended up with is this four-arm cross that was tied. And see the frilly ends of them, of the reeds. See how it's tied, and you have a frilly end. But what that guaranteed was that from the center to the end of each arm was exactly the same distance. And I thought this is clever. Remember, in the Stone Age, they didn't have the sophisticated tools we have today, but this more than did the job. And what they did is, if you look at it, it's not exactly symmetrical. You have a leading edge, and each of the leading edges, as you go around the arms, cuts through the middle. Now, this was a four-arm cross, St. Bridget's cross, but there was also a three-armed St. Bridget's cross. And the difference was this was from Ulster, the northern half or diagonal half of the country, and the forearm was the southwestern diagonal half of the country. And it's significant in itself. And what actually they used to do, so you can imagine, you could either lay it flat on a table, or you could in fact hold it up, hang it plumb, and you have the fires, and you could see in the distance, if you put a fire on the end of each arm and put the sun or whatever you're tracking in the dead center, you could plot yourself a nice alignment. And I thought that was really clever if they did that. And I had no reason not to believe that. The only issue now is how to signal. And then another thing I realized in Ireland, in a village called Shillelagh, they found the earliest form of this, and it's called a shillelagh, obviously after the town. And what's ingenious, it's a timber stake, usually of ash, which is it's a hardwood. And what they did was they found them inside. They used to cook them in a pig's belly, through down its esophagus into its belly, and in the heart of a bonfire. And those fires used to get quite hot. And what the genius of that was that by doing so, they carbonized the outer layers of the wood, and of course the end, the knuckle there on the main trunk, would be more dense than the rest of it, and so they fireproofed it. And doing picking what they did, the knuckle, they guaranteed they had what basically they made a torch, and you could wrap reeds and meat or fat around this, and it'd effectively light brilliantly. And with a long branch, you could make it noticeable distances. And the other thing they could have done is that they could possibly have had something like a board or something to block off the light, like Morse code flashes. Um, but again, when I looked on the other end, you could see evidence of of, of these down in Egypt. So here is some of the gods, and you can see here this is a waz scepter, and it's pretty similar in shape, isn't it, to a shillelagh? And then they have a little cross in their hand, which I'll get on to. So I suppose now is a good time to talk about um, the Egyptian gods. So here you have them. These are the main players in Egyptology. And so you have Osiris, the green fella, and you have Isis, his wife, and then you have Osiris's brother Set. And Set was a baddie in today's version of the devil, or the ancient history's version, Egypt's version of the devil. And Seth had a party one night, and he invited Osiris around, his brother. He says, "Come on around," and his friends were there. And Osiris was a kind of decent, I suppose, innocent enough. And Seth said, "Look, I made a coffin for you. Now, it wouldn't be exactly to get your float your boat today, but in those times, your coffin was, because of reincarnation, your coffin was a big deal to talk about. So to give someone a coffin was a big deal. And said to Osiris, listen, I've made you a lovely coffin, but everyone says you won't fit in it. And I said you would. So do you mind showing everyone wrong? Osiris says, sure, sure, Seth, I'll do that for you. And he gets into the coffin and, quick as you like, Seth and his mates all nail him in to the coffin and throw him into the water and drown him. And then when they take him out, they cut him into 14 pieces and throw him around the world. Now, when Isis finds out, she is beside herself. She's devastated. So much so, she spent an age traveling the earth to find Osiris and put him back together. And she found every part except his penis. And what she did was she fashioned one from gold and gave it to him. And they later came to have a son called Horus there on the left. And Horus spent his days looking for revenge for his father and chasing Seth, or to kill Seth. And that is essentially the story of Egyptian gods, the main story. And they have many gods. I believe they could have upwards of a couple of thousand, in fact. And there's Osiris, and he's green. And I guess he's green because he was dead and brought back to life and cut in pieces and sewn together. So he wouldn't look the best, I'm guessing. And if you look, this hieroglyph is interesting because look up to the top left. You have a green winged bird and an eye. Now, so the bonfires were lit in Ireland, England, Wales, and Scotland, and France, and all over, I'm guessing. But you had certain families that would have looked after the fires, and they would have been names like in Ireland, you would have Carney, or Cairns in Scotland, or Burn in Wales, or Hill in England. And you also had families who did the navigating. And one of those families could have been Gill, or they could have been, as we know, Sully or Sullivan. And Sullivan in Irish, literally, it's again, most Irish names and Welsh and even English and all, they've been anglicised to recent. But so Sudawan is Sullivan in Irish, and Sudawan literally means one eye. And that eye is the eye that would have looked through the middle of the cross on either hanging or on a table or stone, looking out to line everything up. Close one eye, much like as we used to call the border wing, where you literally have one eye to sight and close the other eye. And that is the eye there. And see those green wings? Remember I said on the cross, the St. Bridget's cross, you had the frilly bits on the end? And I'm sure that it got cross-termed with a bird, and that's what the arms of the cross are, is the feather, the wings of the cross. And of course, the St. Bridget's cross evolved, and it evolved through the years, and became rounded like this, and the cross as it is. This is an early depiction, and you see all this symbology. There's the cardinal coordinates of the poles, and then you have the one on the right is the breakdown of the seasons in Gaelic. You have Samhain is Halloween, and opposite that you have Baltana, which is Baltana's bonfire, Baal's fire, and then you have Leah, which is June, the center, Lith, Leah, the most light, and then the Yule, of course, is Yuletide, is the winter, and Imbolc again is in February. This is the beginning of spring. And then they evolved quite a lot through the years, but not, in essence, still the same thing. So you see the one on the right was found in Denmark, and that was around the same time as Newgrange was built. But it's a flat stone, and you see it's nailed notches on the ends of it, and radians. And they would just, this is how they would have done a basic plotting of the skies. The one on the left was found near Stonehenge, and it's 4,500 years old, so about 2,500 BC. And you can see now it was in the Iron Age and Bronze Age, and you had gold, and they could fashion it. And I guess the more elite you were, the higher up the society, the more uh, im- impressive your solar disk. And that's what they were, a solar disk. Um, this was found in Athlone, which is Central Ireland. Um, and you have the first time ever, I don't think since, a lunar and solar disk found together of made of pure gold. Quite impressive. And again, you can imagine the lunar disk was in fact placed to hold a tunic, maybe, and like buttonholes to hold it. And these may have been earrings, but either way, they denoted elite status or high status in the group. And the surprising thing is, over a period of 5,000 years, the technology didn't really change at all. This was found in one of Vasco da Gama's boats. He was an explorer, famous explorer, and that was 1500 AD. So that's like 5,000 years. The technology hasn't changed. And here you could track at night. You have a hole to sight through, or they could put it literally on a flat table and turn it around for their heading, and then relate to where the stars were. But the tech was just the same, and the knowledge was just the same. And then, of course, you have the Ankh. And the Ankh is, as they made their way to Egypt, it evolved. It became a Swiss Army knife version of the St. Bridget's cross. And you can see the wings here clearly. You remember the frilly arms of the old reed cross? And then the bird and the green bird. And it hasn't changed much at all. And there's the wings. And so you'd sight the sun through the middle bit. And if you look, there's the eagle wings, or you see the scarab kind of representing the same. You have the wings of the scarab beetle. But either way, you sight the sun or whatever through the middle, and the arms, you put your fires either side. And again, if you look at the gods, you can see both. So they have both the shillelagh, if you remember, or the was scepter, and then they have what they call this modern or Egyptian version of the cross is the ankh. And so when I looked at the ankh, I thought to myself, what's the etymology? What's the story? Where did it come from? And the earliest I could find was that it referred to either something reedy or sandally with your feet. And I thought, is there anything Irish similar? And I thought of a saying that was lean on cusson. Lean is to follow on cusson. Cus is your foot. So lean on cusson is to follow the path. So on cusson was literally follow the path. And there you have it again. And it's very easy to believe that that was shortened to on cusson, the path, because it was everything they did. And here was a depiction, you have the sun and then the rays. And you see this quite often in the hieroglyphs, the hand, this hand of the sun reaching out, the rays. And here is the bold rebel Akhenaten of the Amun rebellion. So who was he? So his dad and him were part of what was called the Amun rebellion. And that basically was up to that point in paganism, they believed in what we call polytheism, which means they believed in more than one god, many gods. In fact, all the solar theism is everything in the sky was to be honored, from all the planets to the constellations, the zodiac, and of course the sun was the big one. And he and his father took it a step further. In fact, his father got kicked out of Egypt. Um, for that belief. He got back in again, but it didn't go away. And when Akhenaten came along, and there's his wife Nefertiti, who's kind of a powerful woman too, um, he pushed it more. And so monotheism, he caused mayhem in Egypt and refaced everything and changed everything. And they were afraid of what the damage was done. And so what happened was there is records from a Sumerian merchant, I believe, about maybe 30 or 40 years after the Amun rebellion. So you're talking like 1300 BC. And this guy, he recorded of two guys. There was what he called the Egyptian leprosy, 70, 80,000 people, and Josephus and Ossiphus, their leaders, were kicked out of Egypt, and they had the leprosy issue. Now, what he was really saying was they didn't. It wasn't leprosy they had, but their ideas were considered a leprosy. They were outcasts, basically, and that was because they were monotheists, so the Almond Rebellion. And Josephus and Ossiphus. Josephus fitted the description quite clearly to what we call Joseph and his Technicolor Dreamcoat. And most people believe that that, in fact, was Akhenaten. And he was tough by all accounts. And his half brother, Ossiphus, and the two of them led their people, and they were kicked out of Cairo or Giza to the other side of the Nile. And they built a city. They didn't like it. They were tough. There wasn't the food, and it was drier, more arid on the east bank. And they took down the city and moved it north. And something happened to Akhenaten there. I don't know whether he was left or died, or is he the pharaoh that's referred to in the Moses story. But Josephus disappears, and Josephus takes the people into the desert. And his name changed from Ossiphus to slightly Masiphus, and I guess we know that as Moses today. And that was the Atenists were the people. Aten is is the sun or the disk. The Aten, the sun worshipper, monotheism, one god, not many gods. And of course, they didn't like being kicked out of Egypt, and so sought revenge through time on that. What you see here in this hieroglyph, you see Akhenaten, and you see the ray. Remember the hand coming from the sun, and then you see the hand holding the Ankh, holding on the ray of the sun. And see in his hand, he has kind of two columns, like two fires, and an atom or disk in the middle. So it's like following the sun between the two fires, or the two columns of smoke. And Nefertiti doing the same. Um, uh, and there you have more hieroglyphs depicting something similar. And see the rays coming down. One or two of them have an Ankh. So Ankh is the path, isn't it? Ankusa, the path. Again, now I could have been way out with this, and may indeed be, but I think you'll find that things change a little. So there we have, there's Osiris again, and you can see Nefertiti and Litany of Re. And Re is another term for the moon. In Irish is the moon, but Re is also a beam. This is at the tomb of Nefertiti. Osiris is the merged into a single body. So that's basically the blood moon almost and Osiris. And here's Horus. So Osiris is Iris, of course. Sirius, which they tended to worship as well, the dog star. And then Horus is here's Horus, and you see here this is the two eyes. Remember the eyes? So the eye of providence, the eye of Osiris, the eye of Ra, the eye of Horus, and basically it was just an eye sighting. And you see here you have one the bright sun eye looking to the southeast, and then the other eye, a darker eye, looking to the northeast. The two different paths on the grid you see. And Horus gives his name to hours. Horus, hours. Also the gates, the trials, the 12 steps of Horus on the clock, or trials and tribulations of a hero. And would have been the Egyptian version of Jesus in a way. Here you see again, look at the wings and the eyes looking each way. Again, they're the wings, the arms of a cross, aren't they? That's what the wings represent. And the eyes, one eye is looking either to an object on the horizon, either way, to the southeast or to the northeast, the sunrise, and the other one to a constellation or whatever in the northeast. And here you have the was scepter. There you see the shillelagh again. And this is, you have on this side Anubis. Anubis was who you met when you died, and he weighed you between your heart to a feather. And if your heart was heavier than the feather, I was sorry for you. You were off. Um, and if you were good, you got to reincarnate off in the funny boat, which was unusual. And that was Anubis. And then you have Thoth. And Thoth was the calculator, the mathematician, the scientist, the genius of them. And he was represented by a bird too. And you can see there he has the Waz scepter. And there's the Ankh, and of course the Waz is the Shillelagh. And then Lucia. Lucia is light, of light of the moon. Anno Lucia is the year of the thing. I just popped that in for a moment. But so in Ireland, all the way much colder than Egypt. And one thing you don't find, and definitely not 2,500 years ago and older, is you do not find baboons or monkeys. But they found near Tara Hill, the Hill of Tara, where the High Kings of Ireland were coronated. You found there's a mound there, or tomb, a passage tomb, and it's called the Mound of the Hostages. And they found a little boy who wore an Egyptian style necklace, the same as Tutankhamun's. In fact, not just the same, it was the identical minerals and identical pattern of Tutankhamun's around 2400 BC, and 300, and then 2300 Armagh, but maybe about 80 miles up the road, in another tomb, was another Barbarous ape skull found. You know, people said, oh, it was a dog, and these were found around the 1950s. You know, very once, maybe, but not twice. And remember now, the first megalith I showed you, the one with all the mounds, the 14 mounds. Well, this is a curbstone at Naut that was found, curbstone 15. And look at it very, very carefully. In the middle, you have what's the sun. Remember these rays. This is a sun ray. This is a path, isn't it? An ankh, a path, an kusan. And then you have, look at, you have a circle and two fires. So between the fires, you have the sun that gave you the way. Remember, Idra what started me on this was between two fires was the sun, and you followed on Kusan, the path to the sun. Here's another cheeky pup. And of the time, his was Gilgamesh, feared and but warrior, respected and feared at the same time. But possibly cannibal, they reckoned, and he was a giant and he was everything. And this is him. Look at him holding a huge, big kind of ankh or cross. It has wings again, hasn't it? And it has a circle in the middle that the sun you'd sight through. And notice how he is normal human, and then his helpers are kind of half human. And really, what that depicts is that it wasn't they were human too, but he was of a blood. He was a pure blood, or royal blood, and they were just not. And they didn't mix. And I said last year was very interesting. Dr. Laura Cassidy did research with a team of archaeologists and DNA biologists. And they looked at 48 Neolithic bodies found in Ireland, where oldest was 8,500 years near Belfast, and some near Clare, a lot from around Sligo area. And there's tombs in the north west of Carrickeel, it's called, and there's about 14 passage tombs, I think, on top of the mountains there. And it's significant because the people that were found in there, they were different. So Ireland, up from say 8,000, 9,000 BC, right up to about 4,800 BC, was kind of insular. Not, there's enough population, healthy population, but there was just slightly different DNA to say, England and Wales, so it was separated. But then they've seen this DNA come in at 4,800 BC. And on Carrickeel, one of them was from Spain, but the others were not quite similar to anywhere else. The closest they were was to Anatolia in Turkey, southern Turkey, and the Egyptian pharaohs. So they were very similar in DNA to that. They didn't mix too much with the people, and the proof of this is the people that were found in Sligo 300 years later, in Newgrange, they found a brother and sister relationship and their son. So it was incestuous relationship. Don't mean bones, not many bones found in Newgrange, but they found that they were directly, not related distantly, but directly direct descendants of the bodies in the tombs in Sligo 300 years before. And also, very in keeping with monarchy, they wanted to keep their bloodlines to themselves, and this meant that they didn't mix, and so that was kind of acceptable in those periods of, to have a brother-sister relationship in the royal lines just to maintain the bloodline. And I guess this is what this picture represents. So I thought I'd look at the word Gilgamesh, and obviously having looked at on Kusan, I says I'd break Gilgamesh down. And so I did. I split it out into Irish words. And so I had Gil-ga-mesh. Mesh. So Gil comes from Gael, and we all know the Gaels, the Irish Gaels and the Gaels of Gaul. And I looked at that word, and Ga is a ray or a beam, and L is a light on the horizon, on the bright horizon. So there were Esh. I found near my home place 3 places were Kesh, and Esh basically means um, a path or causeway, or stone or reed or wattled causeway. So when you broke it out, it probably meant Gilga. Gil is a kind of the ray of light on the horizon. It doesn't mean the sun. It can be something else. Esh, the causeway. So they're basically Gilgamesh was the people who followed the bright light on the horizon, and the path of the bright light on the horizon, and that's what Gilgamesh in Irish. So it's quite a weird thing. And the irony is, it was mesh. Esh is an Irish word that's from a dialect that's gone where I grew up, um, uh, and you still can trace it out today. And there's another more breakdown, but same thing, Gilgamesh. Uh, and there we have Horus again, and he's looking with the sight. He's sighting the line through, and from his station, there's the wings of the cross. And you look on his head. There's the Aten, that's the sun or the disc, and there's a serpent. And the serpent, I believe, represents the path or the Ankusan. That's what the serpent is actually. Um, and that's why. So the path is looking the same way Horus is looking, and they follow that path of the serpent. And then you see it again. There's Horus, and this time he's on a boat. What looks remarkably a hieroglyph like an American flag, stars and stripes. Funny enough. And there you have Horus looking. He has an ankh, and he has these staffs, which are probably the shillelagh. Then he has, look, one is looking to sunrise, and the other is looking to the northeast. And then you have the snake looking ahead, because the snake is the path, going around the Aten, which is the sun or the disk circle. And gold in Irish is ore. So I thought, well, then that's the word Angkor. Angkor is the gold path, the path of gold, Angkor. Um, and that's the ray that you've seen fixed to the sun. And so I started looking at other things. So to me, there was a clear. The Angkor was the golden path. Angkor, and it keeps you set. It holds a ship in the sea, doesn't it? Angkor. It's a ray from the ground. That's what it means. You're holding on to a ray, the sun, and you move around, but you're always following the sunrise. And this is the Boyne. And here is the horseshoe. And this is where the Battle of the Boyne, which is quite the 12th of July in Northern Ireland, is a big day, the Orange Marches. And this is where it all came from, this battle. And it's quite an unusual battle in the sense that you had a Scottish king who went to war with his nephew, or sorry, son-in-law, married to his daughter. He had a French, an Irish, and a Spanish army, and he fought a Dutch king with an English army Dutch army, German, and some Russians thrown in there. So quite a almost like a world war. And there was over 2,000 people killed. But the interesting thing is, they were mostly killed going to and from the battlefield. And there's no evidence of any cannonballs or gunfire or gunshot recovered from the battlefield. But you can see here, this is where Newgrange is, Doubt and North. And you can see some activity here, but again, it's not telling you what happened specifically. And there it is turning it. That's looking north to south, and this is looking south to north, or normal map layout. And there's Doubt, the Newgrange is here. And that's the horseshoe of the Boyne. Look at the way it tails up, and this is the way it looks. And this is the Valley of the Kings, or Luxor, sorry, on the Nile. Again, where all the pharaohs were buried. And here is the Jiangwei River in China. And see those red columns that I found? They all are actually pyramids, although the Chinese government say they're not pyramids. They're obviously not. They're mounds with trees on them now. And you can't find pictures. It's very hard to find them, but I found some. There's 9. And interestingly, there's a big solar disk layout here where Newgrange would be if it was the point. And down here is where the terracotta army was found. And the Reagans visited, I think, in the early 80s, 83. And here is the Missouri. And look at it, same shape again. Missouri going around St. Louis. St. Louis, Lou. Remember that, Louis, Lou. And if you look, there is the Gateway Arch of St. Louis. And it's funny, that's perfectly aligned with sunset from the river on May 1st. And I think you call it Labor Day in the States. And then now you have the cross. Do you remember the Ulster version, the 3-armed cross? You can lay it down on the ground, and you can do exactly the same as the 4-arm. But what I'm kind of showing here is that all the what we call the nefarious or evil symbolism we know today actually wasn't. Its origins wasn't that way. It's just taken and being used and twisted, because that is what I'd say our 3 6s come from. Google Chrome, which I'll explain later. Then you have CERN. Do you see the 6s there? And then remember the 4-arm cross? Well, I'd been looking at Google Earth for a long time, and there's the 4 arms. And look at the eye in the middle, the sighting eye, the navigating eye. There's the 2 columns. Look at the columns of smoke and the fire. 2 columns. And then you have the checker. Do you remember the grid on the stone, the curbstone, 52? And what you're seeing here is basically it's an organized path. It's order out of the chaos of the landscape. It's bringing on control, a path, the Ankh, or the Angkor, path of gold. And there's the compass, which is the angles. Remember the eyes looking each way? And that's kind of give yourself a trigonometry. You're picking two points and controlling your vector right through, which helps build the grid. Here you have the golden arches, but they are the paths as well, basically. And it's just those famous golden arches, isn't there? But here you see something similar. But and here's the Masonic Lodge layout. Look, have a good look at it. There's the sunrise. There's the Ra in the middle. There's these stars here, and there's the entity to the northeast. There's the compass on the different parts of the grid. See the way it is. And there's the columns with the columns of smoke or fire, and you go through. And the arch represents the sun or the luminous body on the horizon. Remember I said L. L represents that light on the horizon too. It doesn't necessarily mean the sun. It could be a star, it could be a planet, it could be a constellation. L, G means a ray or a beam, and L, Gale, remember, Gilgamesh. And this is what the arch represents typically, is it represents the half. You see half of the atom, the full circle on the horizon. Here's one you'd know in the States. There's the bold Kamala Harris. And see, she's in the White House walking between the 2 columns on the grid. Nothing odd to see there, is there?
No, all this is amazing. Like I'm just sitting here again with my jaw dropped. Um, because for the listeners that are listening to this on audio, this is good. You're gonna have to go on YouTube and really watch this because this is a beautiful presentation. Very visual. Uh, when you look at what I'm looking at right now with Kamala Harris, both of her feet are on black uh, squares or diamonds, and this layout refers way back to that stone with the same grid markings, and how it's tying into now Freemasonry, and how you're breaking down Gilgamesh is maybe wasn't really a person, but a way of going about your journey in your life. And one thing I wanted to back up, and just briefly touch back on, when uh, the snakes were eradicated from Ireland. Uh, I I know this, because of you and what have you. But could you just maybe explain to my audience, a little bit who the snakes actually were?
Yes. Um, so you know the story of Saint Patrick, and he's supposed to have driven the snakes from Ireland, but there's no record of snakes ever actually being, no fossils, no nothing. There never was snakes in Ireland. In fact, some say that maybe St. Patrick wasn't a person, although probably likely there was a leader, maybe it was Patrick, but they were more of he was head of an elite Roman, Holy Roman force that came on a mission. And they say some of the one of the greatest purges in history was actually of the Druids and the high priest. So we had Akhenaten and the royal family and his father, and basically the royal family is something similar to England, I guess. You had Parliament or the High Kings or the High Kings, the High Priests were the High Priests in Egypt were Druids, I believe, and the same type of Druids with the same esoteric knowledge or solar knowledge, um, almanac knowledge as they did the Druids in Ireland. And so the Romans, Caesar and all, they totally destroyed, slaughtered. In Anglesey, there was a massacre of Druids trying to flee and make their way, I guess, back to Ireland. Um, but what happened is, and then you had the Holy Roman Empire, and they came to get rid of the Druids or the serpents or the snakes, and because they were the ones with the knowledge of the path or how to create the path, they were ones with the ancient knowledge, and I guess it was an early version of the burning of the books, and except it was quite literally burning people or druids, and so the serpent represents the path, but also represents the people of the path, and they were always really associated. The grey matter of that was, in fact, the Druids, and that's possibly what happened there. They came to Ireland and they literally, and by all accounts, it was quite brutal. It wasn't a nice picture we imagine. Christendom, when it came into Ireland, there's stories of kids being lined up and burned in front of parents if they didn't convert to Christianity. So it's we tend history tends to paint over and patch up nasty things that there's no record they were violent either. Again, nobody was there, but I think what I'm showing you is that, well, if one thing was different, it's quite possible everything was different to how we knew it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And another quick question, because I'm sure this episode people are like, what, Ghost? Why aren't you asking more questions? Why aren't you asking more questions? Trust me,
Sure. No
I
worries.
don't need to ask the questions. The answers will come, but I did have just one more. And what was the significance of the apes being found in in
Okay,
uh
so you see no reference to Thoth. Thoth was the calculator, the intelligence, the one who worked out the angles, and the one that set the plan. Thoth was the brains behind the Egyptian deities, and Thoth is represented by the ibis head, the man with the ibis head, um, but also is represented by a baboon. And so, if you've seen possibly a baboon, there was a controlling mind. Possibly, if someone was buried with a baboon, they were probably considered a controlling mind, or someone who mapped things out, who had the plan. Generally, the governed, or they were the advisors or something. So that's the significance of Thoth. The other thing is Ireland is very high in the latitudes. It's about 54 degrees north, and the highest closest is maybe 1,500 miles away south, that you would have found Barbaros 8 before. Maybe Gibraltar probably is the furthest north you'd get. So they weren't natural. They wouldn't have survived in the climate. Well, not without being domesticated, at least. And so one may be an accident and find it in the tomb, but to be buried in two places in Ireland unrelated suggests that there was more of a cultural thing than a once-off occasion. Um, Again, with the necklace on the boy, a young boy dressed in a necklace identical to Tutankhamun's, is, you know, there's coincidence, I suppose. There's many coincidences we'd see, and it'd be hard to dismiss. So yes, the baboon is is a representative of an animal that represents Thoth.
Okay, makes sense now. I will shut up again and
Oh, no
let you
worries. Yeah,
continue.
jump
So
in anytime because I guess it's all in my head, and I assume everything is straightforward, but it's there's a lot I guess into it, and I forget that I had to learn it too as I went on this journey, and that's
right,
exactly what it was. But it's so yeah, so we were here, and you see the columns, and remember the different ways, and you have the eye and the compass, and you have the I guess the dark here could represent Saturn. I'm not sure. And there is the columns again. You can see that this isn't an accident, is it? This was released. Actually, you can see this was a tweet herself, wasn't it? She tweeted herself doing the walk, so it's pretty clear it's not an accident. Um, then during this crisis we had advice given, and if you just look at the layout, you have the three people. Obviously, in the center tells you who's the word. I'll explain that later. Here's the semicircle. That's half of the atom. That's the sun on the horizon, and these are the columns. What you're seeing here is they're showing you the path, really, aren't they? So I guess the easy way to explain is look on the top. You see the triangle. So what that represents is the Trinity. You have on the left is sunrise, and as the sun moves through the sky is Ra, the Holy Spirit, I think, of God, and um, then you have at this point is sunset. So Osiris dies in the end. It's Set dies. It's the death of the sun, and you see you have the three here representing the same scenario. So I'll give you a quick breakdown. I guess is that so with the Ice Age, as I said, it ended. You had quite a heavy weight of ice on the northern hemisphere, even the North America, most of as far down well into the Midwest, you had sheets of ice. Huge weight on land, and I don't know if if you've ever seen a football or a soccer ball, as you call it here, if it was punctured or that as a kid, and you dented, the ball is dented, and you as a kid you used to try and push out the dent and then push in somewhere else. You could never get it round perfectly. And the earth was the same. Once the weight came off, the land would have rose. But for that to happen, the land must have sunk somewhere else. So there's lots of legends in Irish folklore, which I grew up with, um, where you learnt of lands were always told about. So this ancient story of Ireland is the first people were the Fomorians. The Fomorians were tough people, and they were harsh and brutal, and I guess they were hunter gatherers. And then this legend has you had the Fir Bolg, and the Fir Bolg were again equally tough and harsh. But you had from a distance the Tuatha Dé Danann, and these were the mystical people, and they were the knowledgeable, educated, technical people, and they looked and they were peaceful, but they seen and didn't like the way the Furbolg were treating their people, and they invaded. And it's the Tuatha Dé Danann are the people who were supposed to build the passage tombs. So if you put it in context, that's 5,000 BC. So that's the Tuatha Dé Danann. And then there's a story that Scota came about 2,700 BC according to legends, if you work it out that way. And she married Miles of the Milesians. He was the king of Spain. And they invaded Ireland, and the Milesians basically outnumbered the Tuatha Dé Danann, but they'd had a truce and a deal, and the Milesians were allowed to. They ruled the land, while the Tuatha Dé Danann were allowed to rule the underworld, and that was the deal that was struck. So there was 4 invasions of Ireland, and Scota, when she came with Miles, Milesians, she was supposed to have taken her tribe of Irish, and they were the Scotty, and they went into invaded Scotland, and that is where the Scotland gets its name. It's from the Scotty, or the Irish tribe of Scotia, or Scota, who was an Egyptian princess. That's how the legend goes. And Miles and Nile, the Nile wasn't always called the Nile either, and so it got its name. And the legend has it in the northern half of Ireland was ruled by the O'Neills, or Niall of the Nine Hostages was their progeny. And there's something like 3 million people are direct descendants of Niall. But he was the first, and possibly where the Nile gets its name. So again, it's thesis. But if you look here at this map, you see Brazil. And actually, that's where Brazil gets its name, from this mystical island that appeared off the west coast of Ireland right up to the 1870s. It was on all European navigational maps. And then below it, you see Limor, south. And I'll show you something on a map that'll. So what happened is sea levels rose with the melting ice, something like 135, 140 meters. That's what they reckon, with the melting ice. But you also had massive seismic activity. And so you would have had tsunamis, because the land would have been rising. Scotland and Northern Ireland are still rising. Scotland is rising by about half an inch every century, still after the Ice Age, from the melting ice. And so the mid-Atlantic has sunk. And there's lots of land that was most likely, in fact, it's hard to believe it wasn't above sea level back about even 3000 BC or 4000. But all the legends, the Chirnanog was a legend I learned, was the people of Chirnanog, the land of the young. Chir is country or land, and Og is young, and they came from the west or the north. So all these stories come from the west or the north, from other lands. And there's 4 main islands that they spoke of, and I can see of 2. The others I'm not sure of. And so Göbekli Tepe were the farmers, and they were about 10,500 BC, and there's some megaliths, amazing megaliths in Turkey. But those people moved. Some moved directly through Europe, populated Europe, and some went west in through the Mediterranean and out probably through the Gibraltar and disappeared. So these people disappeared from 10,000 BC right up to, and appeared again in Ireland at 4,800 BC. Where they went, you can only speculate. The Americas, all around the world, possibly, and probably that was the real golden age. So that's why I guess I'm showing you that. So with all the other knowledge, then you had the disc and the navigation, and so they knew how to navigate. And now you see that symbol everywhere. So you'll see a solar disc. Or here now is the Great Reset. I don't know if your listeners are familiar with the new economic plan, which I don't remember voting for, but you see it's represented by a solar disc or a Malta cross. It's kind of very clear to see there. So remember the story I told you of Osiris and Set. And you'll remember I said that Isis was devastated. She put them back together. And there you have sunrise at Newgrange on the 21st of December, on the winter solstice. And there you have Capricorn, the horns, rising. Capricorn was you seen was is Osiris, is represented by the Capricorn, the horns. But look at the sun and look at Venus, and it's widely accepted Venus was Isis, or Isis was a personification of Venus. And look at the sun in the loins of Capricorn, just like a golden penis, just like Isis did for Osiris to fashion it and give birth to the new day, Horus. So I got a Solarium, a good an open source app, and I learned a lot of the constellations because I couldn't find. It was easier to do that really than to try and get someone to explain it to me. So, but you can see it's quite useful. And so I told you about Scota, and the reason the pharaohs wanted to go to Ireland is this: you have the hill of Tara just south of Newgrange, and the hill of Tara is massively significant. So Ireland, as I said, in ancient times, was made of 4 main provinces and 1 small province, where the drop pin is right there, and that was Tara or Meath, Meath, and Tara, hill of Tara is on the top, and it was it is where the High King, the King of Kings, was, and it's in actually Rings, and he was coronated at Leah Fall, the Stone of Destiny. And so I just used the same app, and I says, well, let's set. So the followers of Akhenaten, when he was kicked out of Egypt with his half brother, which we believe may be Moses, his fall, and he disappeared. The followers were not happy that being kicked out of Egypt, and they didn't like the high priest, because effectively it was the monarchy being kicked out by government, wasn't it? That's what happened. Except it was the high priests or the druids kicked out the monarchy or the pharaohs. And the followers, the monotheists, the Atenists, the ones who worship the sun, did not like it. They wanted atonement. They wanted revenge for this act, this treasonous act, and it obsessed their religion. Now, remember this: they had the esoteric knowledge or the old solar knowledge, and and obviously Scota was before, but Akhenaten had a daughter Tefi, who's believed to have headed back. And there's a coronation stone, Stone of Destiny, and it's believed that the Stone of Destiny was stole from Tara, but there is a stone, the Leah Fall is still there. So it doesn't make sense, or it didn't make sense until now. But so I set, you see the bright reddish orange line, the darkest one, sorry, and it goes up to the northwest. That is sunset on the summer solstice. Now, remember, the people who were kicked out, the Atenists, of Akhenaten, the monotheists, they did everything opposite in rebellion, in revolt against the high priests of Egypt. Remember, the religion in Egypt was about the sunrise. We've seen recently the Valley of the Avenue of Sphinx in Egypt was celebrated, reopened, which is just the lines, sphinxes lining an avenue into Karnak. And that was a significant down near Luxor, in Luxor. And it's dedicated to sunrise on this winter solstice. So the ultimate 2 fingers to the high priest in that way was, instead of worshipping sunrise on the winter solstice, would be to worship sunset on the summer solstice. And set, Satan, Saturn, that is where all these words come from, the devil, Satan. And so I set that line, and I had a good look at it. And then when I did look at it, I realized it was quite an eye-opener, because it followed it and it goes up and it cuts through near my home place, but it cuts through the border. And I had another look at it close up, and I seen, so it's about maybe 90 miles away from Tara, maybe 190, 100, and for almost 4 miles, the sunset line from where the High King is coronated. And this is what the pharaohs wanted to go back to Ireland for, was to be coronated rightfully in the homeland. They seen it as their homeland, according to legend. And there's the sunset line, and there's the border. And the thing is, If I told you to go out there and go walk away 90 miles away and then spray a line that lines up with me and sunset on the summer solstice, I think you can get quite a significant number of people, in fact, the whole planet, to do it many, many times, and you still wouldn't achieve it. That's and this border was drawn up in 1921. So that tells you that it's not really an accident, is it? Possibly, maybe. Now, if you look at the, I found a henge as well. Accidentally, I found one henge, which I'll show you on the map. We see it later. And I found this henge was 40 kilometers, nearly 30 odd miles, 32 miles diameter, which would make it the largest henge by a factor in the world. And it goes through Enniskillen, and it goes through a number of places. And one that gives the game away was St. Patrick is supposed to have come to Ireland, and he came and he destroyed what was known as Crom Crua and his sub-gods 12. And it's near where I grew up, right beside it, in fact. And he was the sun god. He was not just any sun god. He was the blood sun god, the sun god of sacrifice. And to the sun, the blood sun is the sunset. And you can see the sunset line cuts through it nearly as well. And how I know when I found this accidental circle is it cuts through a church. And that church is on the Holy Trinity of Crom. And you know what the Crom is on that thing. And I checked the old maps. So the earliest books wrote by the monks, but remember the monks didn't fully convert. They still held on dearly to the mythology of of pagan Ireland, and they mapped and they were fantastic for the records. They still didn't fully remember there was a split, a fight between Rome and Ireland on the calendar on Easter. So the Holy Roman Empire was quite a big battle because a lot of the education came back from Ireland into England and into Europe during the Dark Ages. So on the calendar, Easter was a month earlier in the Irish end and the English end of the Christian calendar. And so these monks, they weren't entirely allegiant to Rome. They still had the old knowledge. And they mapped this out. But up here you can see, if you look up closer, and you'll see that when I get there, just up where that massive henge, and you can see that is in fact, it's called the Plain of Adoration. And you can see the henge here, small one, in the middle of that big one that I found there. And I thought to myself that's this is a map that's drawn up off the knowledge of that book. And you can see it's in the old province of Breffni, and the O'Rourke's, the Rineys, and the Cassidys. These are the names of the come. You may know them in America, those surnames. This is where they come from. It's Breffni, now it's Cavan, Leitrim, Fermanagh. Not then it wasn't. And it's the Plain of Adoration where they worship Crom. And so I was at home from England. I went over to Ireland during August. I probably wouldn't get there now, but and I didn't. At the center of this huge hen, there's nothing on any map. Nothing. My brother-in-law lives 2 miles from this. I grew up 2 miles from this. He didn't even know it existed. And I went up and looked on top, and there you have about 20,000 tons of rock. And it's a massive, there's about 3 of those rings. This is the big one. And you can see the standing stones inside. I remember Crom had his sub-gods 12, which most likely were the zodiac. And he was the sacrifice god. But also, I believe there was lots to see this stone down here. All around, you found tables like this. Now, it could have been something very dark. And remember, in those times, if they worshipped God, did all good things, and the weather went bad. And then they did bad things, and the weather went good. So there was no rule. It was totally, they believed Baal or Crom or Cernoth, as it later came to be known, didn't care, and you just did everything, good and bad, and if you liked it, you liked it. So yes, they sacrificed a lot of animals and indeed people. And these tables may, they're quite, they're large, they're a couple of ton each, all laying out. And But the other thing I thought is maybe not only that, but possibly this was a massive solarium. Remember the crosses, the big wreath crosses could have been laid on these tables, and they literally mapped out the sky. And this could have been one of the original, if not the original, um, mapping. In fact, it mapped the whole grid all the way to Egypt and everything we know now. And this could be the origin of it. Not nothing. Look at that's a large structure not to exist. And just to put into context, this is Northern Ireland. Here, the ring, the stone, and see behind the trees in this field here, that's the Republic of Ireland. So you have the euro, and you have pound sterling. That's how close they are. It's 100 yards apart. It's right on the border. Massively significant. And there's a story of a racehorse that was buried or kidnapped and died, we assume, in the early 80s, and it was called Shergar. So that henge, I decided I'd map it on the winter solstice, north south. I did it and pulled with Solarium. I pulled it back in so you can have a look at it. And the funny thing is, where I grew up, we all kind of knew where this horse was kidnapped in, roughly, not exactly, but you never opened your mouth because you were afraid this is the time of the troubles. Something bad would have happened to you if you'd opened your mouth on anything like that. But we all kind of knew the area, and you can see here. Here's Pegasus. See where Pegasus is, and if you look at the henge, that is the area where we all reckon Shergar was buried. The most expensive horse in the world at the time was kidnapped and buried there. So you can imagine yourself what that may or may not have meant. Again, it's a coincidence, I'm sure. And here's Cernos, and Crom came to know Cernos, and the word chrome comes from Crom, chromium, and all other nefarious terms that I guess I'm not mentioned. Another certain hormone, but and this is the blood sacrifice, and you can see the early Cern was an antlered god. There's the serpent, see, held in one hand with the torque in the other, which is the lunar, I guess. And there's the animals that you would have had. And this is an early cast back to the time of Dagda, who was supposed to have mythologically built Newgrange of the two Judan. And again, the horn god of Cern, that's his or Crom became Cern. And the oldest map, again, I'll find the 1830s map I referred to. Here it is here. And this is the border now, this ridge. And there you see is the peak, but there's not even on this old map. It's like, it's taboo to even mention that there was a henge there. But look at the name of the mound. It's Greenon. And Greenon is of the sun, or from the sun. And probably the color green gets its name from this, because it's only green if it gets sun. It's Greenon. It's from the sun. And that's why it's green. And if it doesn't get sun, it dies. And that's what Grian is, the sun. So there's interesting in itself. And as I was looking to the northeast, I still couldn't work out what was going on because the times are wrong. And but I did look at sunset on the summer solstice, and you can see all the usual campaigners of Set and Satan. You have Hydra, you have Secant, you have Leo, you have Lynx and Gemini, Cancer, all of that for the sunset and the summer solstice. That's 3300 BC. I looked at the Sphinx, and it's facing east, so I said I'd line that up and set it for the winter solstice or the March solstice, and then I pulled it and I seen that actually on the winter solstice I set it up, and I found that you had to go back to 33,000 BC, because we know that Leo or the Sphinx was originally a lion, wasn't it? And it would have looking to the east, it's with sunrise. So I says it's logical to assume that when does the sun rise with Leo? And that's how far back you have to go on the winter solstice. Is 30,000 odd BC. Maybe 29,000, some people speculate. The other thing from Newgrange, when you look to the northeast, you look high, the winter solstice, you have Hercules, the constellation. And also in the same line, you have this. This is Fingal's Cave off in the Hebrides of Scotland, the west coast of Scotland. And it's just across the sea from the Giant's Causeway. These are possibly the Pillars of Hercules, which Plato said was the entrance to Atlantis. Um, and there you have the two. This is the Giant's Causeway, and this is Fingal's Cave. And then the entrance to Atlantis. It makes sense. In fact, I suppose now is a good time when J.R.R. Tolkien of Lord of the Rings was asked, "Oh, that's a great story you made." He says, "That's no story." He says, "I translated books directly." Yes, he says, "I made the characters fanciful and almost mythical, but if there was a true story," he reckoned. And he got angry. He used to get angry. I've seen that, but he reckoned that it was, if you look here, that just here was probably where, if you look at some of the maps, before the sea levels rose, you could literally walk from Ireland and across an estuary to Norway, into Scandinavia, and you could walk right into the continent. And he reckoned this was the Shires, there, that part of Scotland, between Scotland and Ireland, before the sea levels rose. And I guess St. Patrick again was famous for the shamrock. Remember, I showed you what the Trinity was. And this is how he or they explained the Trinity: three gods in one, God the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And it's there you have three and one. In reality, the Trinity is the sun in three phases: at sunrise, middle of the day, and sunset. And all the symbols that come from this through time. And then,
Now,
of course,
with
yes?
the shamrock, was it you that was telling me that four-leaf clovers aren't really a thing? Like,
Not well. They say a lucky four-leaf clover. It's lucky to find one. You don't find them, but it's a mutation. So if you find one, it's really rare. So it's
okay,
luck.
all right, all right,
But shamrock is a clover. It's in the clover family as well.
okay, right.
But I reckon like that's only estimation is that the three Trinity basically. That's what the shamrock represents. The Trinity.
Okay, I'll shut up again.
No
Continue.
worries, no worries. No, jump in anytime, Ghost, at all. Anything you find or think that works, just or anything that you. Because I, as I say, I'm so used of going through this that I forget that something.
Well, actually, I do have a slight question because you were talking about Horus and how we got hours. What, in your opinion, is the correlation between Horus and Kronos? I know they're two different.
Well, Kronos came with the Greek,
Yes.
but I think Kronos is. I think Kronos is because Crom did mark the zodiac as in chronologically. And I think it's a Greek, it's a morphic term for Crom. So Crom is about 5,500, maybe 7,000 years old.
Okay.
And Kronos came much later. So I believe that it more for CERN and Kronos, they're all of the same origin.
And if I'm not mistaken, in your, and I'm hoping I'm not jumping the gun on anything, but in your research, civilization in what you've discovered actually started in Ireland.
I don't know if it started. I'd say this eon started. But if anything, like so 5,000 BC, people came. They came from somewhere. That could have been the Americas. It could be the Mid-Atlantic. It could be Africa. It could have been around the world. There's a gap of about 5,000 years between, say, Anatolia, which is Turkey, southern Turkey, the main body of Turkey, this Asian continent. But and that's where you've all that. And then that's about 10,500, 10,000 BC-ish. They disappear. You have the onset of farming just shortly afterwards. And then on the west coast of Ireland, they arrive and they somewhere, I believe, some disaster.
Okay.
And it to me, it gives credence, if not Atlantis, definitely a sophisticated people that came from somewhere else. And But the eon as we know today, this epoch of time, yes, it began with the landing, in the Tuatha De Danann. I told you this mystical people to the west, who
Right.
these probably were. Mythology says they landed right up, actually, in that they landed on ships from the air. This is literally how it's translated. They came in the air in ships
Hmm.
and landed on that mountain, one of the mountains beside the big henge I showed you of Crom, and they burned their ships. And this is who they were. And some, there's all kinds of stories you could assume with that.
Right.
But that could have been a tsunami. It could have been, and they burned the ships to keep warm, or you could have more kind of extraterrestrial views of it if you wanted as well. But
Right.
that's actually what the Book of Invasions, which is the earliest record of the old folklore, the written record. But
Okay.
most of the stories are learned orally, which I learned a lot of them orally, handed down. All the stuff I would have got.
Now, there was one other thing with when
Sure.
you were showing the pictures of Gilgamesh and the two half human beings on each side. Now,
Yes.
is that where maybe they got the story of the Nephilim out of the Bible? The Nephilim are supposed to be, these taller beings, but they were angels that came down and mated with human women and created these Nephilim or Nephilim or however you want to call it. Is that kind of
Um,
maybe where that could have came from, or vice
I
versa?
think it's a good possibility. So I'd propose that, as I said, if you're told something enough, you start to believe it. And if you're told you're not God like us, you're not nothing like us, you're a half breed, and you're told it enough times, you begin to believe it, don't you? So imagine these people with more knowledge. They probably look down with contempt almost. Imagine
Right.
they've lost their birthright, their fabulous place in another land, and they have to live in the sticks, primitive. Go back to like Planet of the Apes scenario,
Hmm.
um, and they look down on those they were around, and so you know. I believe that Nephilim probably were these people as they landed on their ships, came in to the savages, the hunter gatherers, and they could farm and were sophisticated and had calendars and could predict the celestial bodies' movements and all these wonderful things. And then you had guys who ran around scantily clad, hunting with spears, deer, and maybe boar.
Okay.
So you could imagine it's more of a metaphorical thing than I'm not who really knows, but it
Right.
would make sense that that's how stories come, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um, but I
So
guess
in your research, have you come across anything that would maybe point proof that there were giant men or a race of taller humans at one time?
there's some cairns in Ireland that are difficult to explain how they could have moved them even from. So I guess what I haven't said is my background is in civil engineering construction, so I'm familiar. I write plans, I do methodologies, and I work with a lot of kind of type projects. So I've experienced it looking, and some of these constructions are just explained for normal people, but I haven't directly, bar the legends. Finn McCool was a giant, an ancient mythological Irish figure. There was lots of giants. Cuchulainn was a super god-like demigod almost in his athletic and warrior abilities. And then the Tír na nÓg. The Tír na nÓg were um, less described as tall. They seemed to live a lot longer. You could live hundreds of years and still look young, but they had immense strength. Um, and there's lots of the Fir Bullock were kind of giants. Those were the predecessors to Jadan, big and tall. So it's hard to. There's lots of reference to giants, that's for sure, um, in mythology. but you don't know whether it's, while I'm of the opinion now that folklore, some of it's fantastical. It's probably a lot of it is more accurate than actual recorded history. It's just
Right.
oral history, and a lot of the stories were recorded in poem and song. And there's quite a lot sensible way to teach history or to get, because then it was more likely to be remembered accurately if it
Hmm.
was a song and verse or a poem. And so the Book of Invasions is mostly all poem. So it kept, and the bards. So in each tribe or clan, you would have had what's called a bard. They were responsible for learning everybody's genealogy, everyone's connection. They were also lawmaker and peacemaker, and they would have ensured that trial and it was fair trials. So a king would pay was is on a level with the ordinary, the Brehon laws. So there's lots of recorded stuff like that. So it's quite accurate. But the mythology stuff, it's hard to know whether there were people or constellations or yeah, there is a lot of the stories that the bards would have told were about referring to giants or different people or it's
I'm
it's
getting
one
a
of
little
those, I guess.
feedback on your mic, Alan.
Oh, sorry. How's that?
Much better.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's all right.
Um, so yeah, no, it's there is a lot of mythology, but I haven't come across anything conclusive
Okay.
yet. But
Yet, exactly, yet. Because I know
yeah,
that you ain't done research in this stuff. This is the beginning of a
there's a
big
lot to
picture.
tie the dots. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
part of an enormous picture, and it's not just Ireland, it's everywhere. Everywhere has a fascinating story, and every continent.
Well,
But you'll see as we go.
yeah. Now that we sidetracked for a minute, let's get back into it. So I
Sure,
apologize.
no worries. So what you see the sunrise line from the northwest to the southeast, and I found loads of different lines that many in varying distances apart, and improve the accuracy. I found, I've tracked the sunset line, but I still could not work out the northeast line, and I only did that about 2 months ago. And so when I divvied it out, this is the line in question. I couldn't work out what these lines were that I'd found an alignment for, and they were all very accurately measured at 51.26 degrees. Now, a thing to note was back, I was always looking at sunrise and the winter solstice, but actually a day in ancient times began with sunset the day before and ended with sunset. So I says, what if I look at sunset on the 20th or just after dark? And so I did that, and I set my app, the Scenarium, up to do just that. And I set it up so that I could look at 51.26 degrees. And I found this. I found that Jupiter was at that point and rose on the winter solstice on the 20th, in the evening of the 20th, at about 7:45, 1944. Actually, before that, 1942 or something. But it rose up at exactly 51.26 degrees, and it rises in Virgo. And then I went, hang on a minute, there's Jupiter is rising in Virgo. And I just thought, I remembered a movie, and it was Jupiter ascending back a few years ago. And if you look at it carefully, there's a Channing Tatum, and he's like Superman about to take off, go and ascend to the right, just like the planets do, rise in the northeast and move to the west around the constant zodiacs. And there is Mila Kunis standing there. And I thought, hang on a minute, it's just a bit of an odd pose, the whole lot. But when you go back, you could see clearly that she's posed just like Virgo. In fact, anytime you see Virgo artwork, it's always represented the same way. And there's Jupiter rising up through the east and down to the south and around to the west. And that's what we were seeing in this picture here. She was standing just to represent Virgo, exact same pose, and he's just like Jupiter rising. or Jupiter ascending even. So I got to a position where I'd worked out the two lines. So the two eyes, remember, of Horus, the dark one was indeed Jupiter. Jupiter is the father of the moon, and Saturn is the father of Jupiter. So mythology, I would tell you. And then, so I'd satisfied myself that I'd found the line all the way to Stonehenge from Newgrange. So the next issue was I'd never planned to look further. I'd figured someone else would do that. But one night I got bored and it got the better of me. And I says, I'll have a look at least. I just have a nosy for a minute or two. Of course, there's no such thing as there. But when I looked and drew the map out fully, I could see that it was a bit straight and jumpy. And I says, oh, this is going to be tricky doing this. But remember, the lines I found on the projection was on a Mercator projection map, which shows you Greenland is the same size of Africa. In reality, it's 14 times smaller. So the curve is a big thing, and that actually does make sense, even though this is straight. It didn't just look right. So when you pull the line straight. So I had a better look at it. I looked at the French coast first of all, and I found to the west, I found a place that was Auberville, which is kind of a gold flame village, and then you have Saint Martin au Bonneau, which is another fire reference, two churches, two old churches, ancient churches. So I thought about that for a minute. I looked and seen when I joined them up, they were quite a way off the old line. I looked then in France and I seen Notre Dame, of course. And then as I went, then the next down, I found just again to the west and south was Lignières. I found an old obelisk and an old fort and in Lignières. And that's what drew my attention was the name, which basically means alignment, really, in French. And then I found down in the town Dijon, I found Notre Dame Dijon. So now my attention was curious. I'd seen that it was to the southwest of the line. And I says, So I had a look, and I could see that it didn't really work as well. So I plotted, and you could see the lines were kind of to the south. So I says, right, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the line in on top of them, because what we do it in engineering today, you call it smoothing. So you smooth the line. Railway line, for an example, or motorways. You don't go with 30-degree sharp turns. It's smoothed. You to keep it constant, steady steer. And I did the same when I pulled it in, and I looked, and I was much happier with that. In fact, I got as far as the Swiss border, and I found two fires either side on the ridge over Lake Geneva. And then I seen it went through a tower in Chateau Aubonnet. And Aubonnet, French, au in French means gold, and bonnet is fire, gold fire. So I said, I'm onto something here. And then when I crossed over the Alps, of course, I didn't go into the Alps. You get lost in the Alps with sheer volume. But I found a town or two places in a village called Santia. And Santia is in Indian or Sanskrit is for moon. It basically means moonlight. Remember, Newgrange is the moonlight. Is the moonlight. Moonlight is effectively the reflection of sunlight off the moon, and that's where the Leah, the color, comes from. Leah in Irish means kind of the grey color of the moon or aluminium color of the moon. Aluminium. Al means color, isn't it? And then I guess this is a point where I'll jump off the PowerPoint for a minute, and I'll go straight to my map. So as I say, there was what I had found. So of course it didn't look just right. So I said I would zoom in, and I'd pull the lines, and I'd literally put in the new line with the new curvature, and I said I'd turn off these lines here because they were no good anymore. They didn't work. They didn't have that smoothing we spoke about. And here is what I found. So I have the two matches then in Santia. So you go through two old churches, and then you have this anomaly here, which is a solar disk, isn't it? Aligned parallel to the line. And then over the other end, I found it went through an old church tower over here. Son Agata, and Agata is paternal, it's father line, which is the son was the male, the father is God the Father, eh? And as I went on through, I found more. Lunigiana again is a moon reference, and Castag Leon. So remember, I'll come back to that actually. And then I moved down through, and I got more Leon in Lion, and Mary Maggiore is Mary Magdalene. When I went through here, you see the old church tower here, and the church shape is significant. And as I went down through, I found the same in many villages. There were two fires, and I pulled between them all as I went through. I'll continue on. I left, of course, here's an interesting one. I left Italy, but before I did, I left this Chiesa di Ruta. So di Ruta, you can interpret that whatever way you want. But I found that it went through this old Chiesa di Ruta, this old castle, and it was controlled by the family of the Luna. Let me see if I can pull it up, or did I? They got the old. Did I save the detail? No. And I yes, here. So here you had so look, here's a story on the Chiesa Madre Parioche Santa Maria Maggiore. So St. Mary of Magdalene, basically. But if you look, that it says once controlled by the Sanchez de Luna Dragonas. Daragonas. So Dagda, you have de Luna of the moon. Teresa Sanchez de Luna married, and this is going back to the 11th, 12th century, and this I believe that family is still around, like, but they were the patrons of that village. And then so they were all Luca, you see here, and all of this Luna and Leone coming down, and then I noticed so there were Leone, Luca of the moon, and then I noticed when I got to Greece, I was seeing George's fortress. St. George. And what did George do? He killed the dragon. And I found this point here, and it was perfectly lined with the same parallel to the line. And then opposite, I found this here, which is Egg Lena, and in Irish, egg means from Lena, from the Line Beach. And of course, there's these solar disk references here. And as I go on through, then I found in the islands, I go through again, there's Pangea, which will make sense in a minute, and Elias Church of Magdalas. And then down on the south of Greece, I found this old fort. And it just happened to be lining up with one down here on the coast, and I found bisect those, and the line was going through. And this village was called Lefki, and Lefki is Greek for Luke or Lu as well, the moon. Ironically, my youngest is 10 now. We both named him Luok, or Moonbeam, which is an old Irish name, but we didn't realize it's a very rare name. Actually, in fact, we don't know anyone else. But it's just ironic that this whole story, and his name is that. And then I find George, and George killed the dragon again in Greece, down towards Crete. And then you end up, of course, and I pulled it all to the Sphinx. because it's the oldest, isn't it? The oldest lion. Well, even though Akhenaten probably put his face on it, it was a lion before it was his face, because he seen himself as the lion, didn't he, of Egypt? So that was fine. And what we know then was that um, Akhenaten, we know that rebellion. And so what happened there was uh, Moses went and he went to Mount Sinai, didn't he? And then that went back up into Israel. And I know the Hyksos went up near Haifa, and they were 200 years before. And this is where in about 1500 BC, and Akhenaten was 1300, 1335 actually BCE, when he disappeared or exiled or killed or whatever. But the Hyksos were left before, and they went back to Judah and Palestine, which was, Israel is only a new name actually, is Isis, Ra, and El meaning the light on the horizon. Um, and so that was their journey. Okay. So that reminded me then, my sister, so I just turn all this off for now. My sister then, during the summer, was the G7 meeting this time, and they met over here in Mount Michael. Here it is, and this is where they met, and that was the G7. I thought that funny and interesting, and so I looked at that line in more detail, and so what my sister sent me was that there was 7 of churches, and they're all Archangel Michael or Saint Michael, the Michael line. So I looked at these and I just I turned them all on. I'll turn all these lights on. Sorry, bear with me. And I found that the line goes all the way from that place where the Hyksos are, Haifa, and it's significant. This is where the Jesuits were formed. I think the Knights Templar arrived, and it's in Mount Carmel Monastery in Haifa in Israel. Very significant. And I also found, I looked at the line, and this is the Michael line, the Archangel Michael line, and it goes and it follows sunset on both summer solstice and May the 1st, Labor Day or Baltana. It's Baltana, Baal's fire. Is Baal's fire is the Irish for Baltana. It means for May, the 1st of May, and it ends here at Skellig Michael off the coast of Ireland. Right here, the last line. And remember then I told you about Scota and her line, and she left, and she died up here. Her grave, Scota's grave. Remember, she was the she's buried here, just next to that line, and that's the Michael line at the end of it, from Israel all the way up to Ireland, and it goes all the way up to here. And I followed this line, and it goes through a lot of forts exactly. You can see here, these are the forts. And then as I moved along up, I found that it moved to here, Kinnity, and I had a closer look at it, and I seen that, wow, it was a pyramid, and it was built in a back garden by this English captain who had just returned from Egypt back in the 1820s, and he built this pyramid, the only one built in recent times in Ireland. And that takes you right up, and here is Tara. Just bear with me now. I'll show you Tara. Here's the hill of Tara right here. And so this is where the kings were ordained here. This is where you're coronated, the high king, the king of kings, the king of the rings. See the rings? The king of the kings was buried here. All the others are cairns and towers that I'd found. But I looked at this and I thought, this is interesting. And then I thought, well, I'll look at the rest of it. And as I pulled it together, I says, okay, now there's the two, the Michael line. So I know the G7 met here, and then I said, well, let's have a look. And there you go. What did I see? I don't know if you can see that. I'll just turn off all the labels, maybe, um, make it easier to see it. Um, and I'll do the same on the Michael line. And now you can see, what do you see? And I'll show you what you see. I'll go back to the slides. If I can bear with me now.
I have a feeling you're going to blow my mind again. I really do.
Well, when I looked at it, I seen that shape. It was obvious what that shape is. It's infinity.
Holy shit. Oh my God.
There it is there. It's infinity. So to look at it, this is the Luach from Newgrange, the moon line, the Luach line of the moon, to Luc, Louis, through Notre Dame, all the way through France, and then it turns into as it gets to Greece, it's the Lione and the Lu and Santia line, which is Hindu in Italy. And then it becomes the Luca, and then Levki and George in Greece, the George line. And then you have Akhenaten and his followers Legate out here, and then they turn totally against the high priest, and they worship sunset instead of sunrise. And then you have this line that follows sunset, the Michael line, all the way back up, all the way up to here, up to Ireland, and yeah, it's absolutely mind blowing.
Oh
Um,
God. Yeah. Oh,
and so when you can see quite clearly that it's a infinity, all the
yeah.
infinities, and even in the way it is, because
So do you
if
think that's
you
how they got the infinity sign?
yes,
Hmm.
absolutely. It's this one down here, roughly, isn't
Yeah.
it? Or any of them,
Yeah.
in
The
fact.
the one that looks more like a bow tie.
And it keeps repeating. Look at it there. It keeps repeating. Infinity just, in fact, it's the ultimate two fingers to God in a way for the Satanists or set line, because it's older than God. Infinity is forever each way.
Right. And
It's
if
been,
you look at if you take one half of that, it looks like the top of an of an ankh or an ink.
it does, yeah. One part of it indeed is
Yeah.
the sun, the Aten part, and
Mm-hmm.
again, Ouroboros is the snake that eats itself in a circle. And here you have the dragon eating itself. But remember, George kills the dragon. Remember, George is the Luach line, and
Right.
you have the Satan line. So, um, and then you have so here's the Masons. So the Masons were the builders of the builders of the dolmens, the passage tombs, the henges. They were the builders of the pyramids. They were the builders of the churches, all through the ages. And then you get to the first, the 11th century, and you have Longshanks, who was Edward I, who was famous for fighting William Wallace. And so the Masons were building churches at that time. And so what you seen was, a baker or a blacksmith could maintain work in the same village for their life, but a stonemason couldn't. You got to build one church and you had to get lost. So the Masons had it kind of tough in a way, I suppose, but they had all the esoteric knowledge from ancient times. They knew the alignments, the constellations, knew the key elements of building and to maintain the geometry and all of this. And so they went from village to village. So, from Scotland into England, and even into the continent of France and Germany and so on. So they went from village to village, and it was important to connect, just to keep alive and keep eating. It was important to connect with with the local masons to get work, and not to draw attention to yourself for the other local people who wanted to get work. So they had this secret languages and symbols, and I guess the funny handshakes or whatever they had. They knew how to identify each other when they got around. And that continued, and the churches got more fanciful in the mid 1600s. Um, and of course, the Masons got wealthier as the churches got fancier. They were more in demand, more money. But the thing is, their kids didn't want to do stonemason and get their hands dirty. They wanted to get into the court, the merchant class, the legal system, medical, all trade, across the oceans was opening up. And they, the father still wanted to pass on the esoteric knowledge, but they weren't going to be masons. So they decided to let them be freemasons, free of the actual toil of masonry, but to have the esoteric knowledge all the same. And that's what happened. But meanwhile, you had Akhenaten's followers went into Egypt, and then you had the birth of Christianity. You had the adaptation of Christianity by, remember, look at the line goes from Egypt up into the Israel and so on, and then north of that you have Turkey, and you have the Byzantines, and Constantine. The Roman Empire was in two halves, and Constantine was in the eastern half, the Byzantine half. And of course, he would have been well versed in the Atenists, and he took on Christianity and seen the power of it, and changed the stories. And then you had the council, the Holy See, where all the Gnostic churches after him were kind of removed, and you had the same story going through. And then later on, you had Judaism, of course, was there much before. But again, this Atenus was much older. Kabbalah, I guess, was older than the Judaism. And so what happened was, in time, you had the Judaism spread out to Europe, much as Christendom did. And in the 1600s, or you had, or 1600s, yes, you had Sabbatia. And most 60% of the Jewish people in Europe believed he was the Messiah. He was definitely the Messiah. And he did something quite incredible. He changed his religion. He changed to Islam. As you can imagine, if you believe someone's the Messiah and then he changes your religion, that's unbelievable. And he believed that people needed to see the virtue in evil. You couldn't understand true virtue and good if you didn't understand the virtue of evil. But when he died, and then maybe 70, 80 years later, then another man came along, Jacob Franks, and he was a pure, what you would term today's, or more recognizable as a true Satanist, because he believed you didn't need to weigh bad against good. There was a virtue in bad all by itself, and he believed in the full inversion. Remember, the followers of Aten worshipped the sunset, just in rebellion to the sunrise priests. Well, what he did was he decided everything was inverted. So what was good was bad and bad was good. And that's exactly what he did. And so he met a certain Mr. Adam Weishaupt in Bavaria in 1670. And then we had backed by a certain banker, Mr. Armstrong Rothschild, to form what we now know the Illuminati. And they were in the hunt for something, some kind of society, a secret society where they could grow and bloom. And lo and behold, you had this kind of loose connection, Freemasons to the Masons. It was the perfect cover. And they infiltrated the Freemasons. So much so that the old Mason type decided to get out and move back to their own Mason. And I guess both lines are kind of the Masonic. The old Masonic would be the Sunrise, and the Freemason or Illuminati would 100% be the Satanists. Now, I could be wrong on that, but that's what the evidence would lead to believe. So you had, there's the infinity again, if you can see it, the sun and moon. And you have a toad and the serpents. Do you see the serpents? The red, and one is Luke, one is Satan, one is sunrise, sunset. The serpent is, of course, the path, and the people who who generate the path. And then you have on the right hand side, you have, well, I guess what could be described as Lucifer, the light bearer. But Lu actually is more moon reference, and it's the light of the moon, which is the sunlight of the moon. It's a second hand light, isn't it? That's Lucifer. And then you have, there's the heart and feather, the good and bad weighing between the two. Again, it's and the crucifix in the middle and the fire, and the two either side. There's a lot going on in that picture. And you can see in the movies today, you have the Eternals as the latest Marvel incarnation. It's the you have the sky and see the circles and the arcs. Well, actually, if you put that on the ground, it'd be more like the curves you'd see through all the fort and bonfires and cairns on the ground, the ring forts. And look at the people, and look at the dolmens in the background. And this is sunrise or sunset, and this is set 7,000 years ago, which is roughly the time of these people landing in Ireland. It's all a coincidence, I'm sure. But now we go to what I call the Bible of the Illuminati, and I believe that to be the Star Wars. And here you have Ray. Remember, I said Ray was another word for the ray of the sun, a sunbeam, and it's also an old Irish term for the moon. And here she is. She's down in the legendary Jedi temple, and she's going down to find out what her purpose is. And she sees infinite number of herself being reflected through down near the dark pool. And the funny thing is, this movie was filmed on Inishmickeleen or Skellig Michael, the last island on the west of Ireland, in the Michael Line. They filmed the movie there. And at the end of that, that is 8, I think it is. You have Luke Skywalker, or Horus, or Luke of the moon, Lucifer. And there you see the two suns, and he's on. There's the island, the bottom left, and that's Inishmickeleen. And then I thought about the name Inishmickeleen. Inish is island, but Mickeleen is the old dialect from Kerry, and Mick is another way of saying Mac, which means sun. Mac Aleen. Leen, remember I told you, was the followers of the line, or the line, or the followers. So the son of the followers. So Ark is actually, I'll show you in a bit, but arc is a curve, isn't it? And sorry, here's Neo. Remember, Neo means new, doesn't it? Neo means new, and there he's repeating things. He goes to the architect, and it all starts again and again, and it goes through the same process. And then you have the Avengers, Infinity Wars. Look at it, and they basically half the people are removed, don't they? And you have then you have the Infinity Stones. And then someone pointed out to me on another group, a Discord group, Alan, it looks like, look at the Hill of Tara. Look at it again. It looks just the shape. This is where the High King of Ireland was coronated. It's infinity. Look at the shape of it. It's exactly the same as infinity. And I guess this is a good point then to show you the middle. And so we'll explore your etymology a little bit further when I go through. So here we go, and let me just click on all of this.
This is fascinating. Like how you like you brought it into the movies. So it's like they always tell you exactly. I know you referenced Jupiter Ascending earlier, and then now you brought in Star Wars and everything else. So it's like,
yeah,
the elite obviously really do know about this history and want to keep it secret, but at the same time, they want to show you that they know.
Yes, they have to tell you, because let me explain. So remember I said Michael is son of the lion, but Archangel Michael. Well, let's look at it. Look at the lines. They're curved. In fact, they're arced, aren't they? They're arc lines. Angel is the angle,
Mhm.
isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the angle. But remember, I says on means the in Irish. And Gel, well, we just did Gilgamesh. Ge is the
Mhm.
ray of El, the light on the horizon. It doesn't say where, it just says a light on the horizon. So
Right.
Angel is the ray of light on the horizon. So arc is the curved ray of light on the horizon of the sun of the followers. Archangel Michael. That's
Now
literally what it means.
you you did just point out Neo from the Matrix, and
Yes,
the new movie is coming out like 2 days before Christmas.
yes, it's coming out the day after the winter solstice,
Mhm. Is
which
there?
would be the rebirth, wouldn't it? The rebirth.
Yeah.
So they've
So,
clearly targeted that date as the new era.
oh man.
But look at this. So the center of the lines meet, and here you have at a little old church, and here it is here. It's the Chiesa di San Pantaleo. That's the name of the church. We'll have a look at it here. I'll just drag this fella so you can have a look, see. So the center of infinity of all the big Illuminati and the big show around the world is based on this little old church here. Doesn't look much, does it? I wonder what's in it though.
Yeah, it looks half run down.
Yeah, but maybe there's a point to that.
Hmm.
So let's look at the etymology. Um, and if you look at it, uh, so when you look at the name, the Chiesa is the Church de San Saint Pantaleo. So what does pan mean? Pan, Aramic.
Okay. I was thinking
Pan,
the God Pan, but yeah.
Pangea. It means all.
Hmm.
Remember Leo?
Mhm.
What's Leo?
The lion.
Leo means lion, yeah. But let me put it to you. If you went and you remember the Leo, the constellation wasn't a lion always, it was a dog once upon a time, a big dog.
Oh, really?
Hmm.
I did not know
And
that.
what happened is you had these followers of the line, this line, the Lucifer line,
Hmm.
the George line, the Louis line, the George line, and they go all the way and make it to Egypt. And then they see these big, wonderfully big animals with manes in Egypt. So they named them after their journey. They named them after the lion, the lion.
Oh shit.
So they're called the lion.
Oh, it makes sense now. Holy.
So let's look at this again with our newfound etymology. San Pantaleo means the church of Pan is all, and Neo, we now established, means the followers of the line. It's the
Oh,
church of all lines.
oh shit.
And where is
Oh
it
man.
beside? It's beside the town of Vinci. And who was born near Vinci?
Leonardo?
Leonardo. There he was born here. If you look at his little, this is where he was born. You could have a little solar disk out front, as you do. There's Casa Natalia de Leonardo. So now with our newfound etymology skills, let us break down Leonardo. So Leo, what does Leo now know? What do you know what it means?
Lion.
And which means line,
Lion. Yes.
line or follower. Ardo, Ard in Irish means high. So high line of Vinci.
Hmm.
Now, while I don't doubt he existed, I think he's very much like the manufactured pop bands of today or actors. They do what they're told. In
Right.
fact, it's the same as acting, isn't it? And he did, and remember, they have to tell you, so they have to maybe share certain knowledge with us. And look, and here's two fires either side. There's a fort, burned out to make a fire, and then you go the other side of the circle, and here you have a circle anomaly. And
Hmm.
look, he is no different. Leonardo da Vinci, he might have been real, but he was manufactured to serve a purpose, to share certain knowledge that had to be shared.
Okay.
He did the Vitruvian Man and stuff like that.
Yeah, because he was well, we were told he was an inventor, right?
Yes, yes, and he had ideas of helicopters, didn't he, and planes,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Scuba gear, all sorts of shit.
and he toyed with infinity as well. He toyed with, it's all that stuff. And sorry, I'm just getting to where we were. And he knew all those old equations, and the one that most he knew was the golden ratio, wasn't it? It was everything he did was the golden ratio. It was how the body he drew the just going through all, you see the connections there. It's when you
Mm.
see them together, it's quite profound.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But there's a logic to it. There's the Vitruvian Man that he created.
Yeah.
The golden ratio 1.618. And he did that. Our body is more or less designed perfectly with that golden ratio. So remember the large henge up in Ireland, Crom. Do you remember the big large one? On the very north, in 2013, the G8 met on a golf course right on the top of that henge.
Mm-hmm.
Crom's henge, Chrome.
Oh,
Blood sacrificed
God.
God. And then you had the border where it is exactly on the sunset line. In fact, if you look at Ireland, the border where that line cuts is just like they say Ireland is like a baby, and that this line cuts its throat.
Hmm.
And they meet here. The G7 meet here, and then this year they meet. There's Mount Michael. There's the G7 met in July, and they light a fire there. And there's the Prime Minister of England's father, is Stanley Boris Johnson's father, and look at what he's wearing.
An
Look at these
infinity
people.
sign.
Infinity sign, and it's a solar disc all in one, isn't
Mm-hmm.
it? And
And
look
what's
at
with the
these.
red witches?
Well, they are supposed to be the Extinction Rebellion, and they throw blood on the street, but actually, it's all a sham and a show. They're most likely witches.
Mm-hmm.
Satan dressed in red, and they did a slow procession. That was done. That was taken the night they burned that bonfire for the G7.
That's some fucked up shit. Like they put it right in. Oh, damn.
So now I'm going to give you what I believe is the reason the Twin Towers came down.
Oh shit. I'm just gonna shut up right now. Go ahead.
This is the sunrise winter solstice between the Twin Towers. Okay. And I was thinking about that. There was, remember, Glasnost and Perestroika, and you had Mr. Bush soon to take over from Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev. There's the Twin Towers behind. And then you see the sun looking on the destruction. Again, you've seen him before, George W. And then you've seen when it was destroyed, they rebuilt this tower, which is One World Tower. And that is sunset lined perfectly through the middle of One World Tower. And it dawned on me what the connection was.
It was all a ritual.
It was all a ritual, and I'll show you now why. Because when you look at the yellow line, the Lucifer or George line or Luoc line, you see that they are all two fires. See? Or two fires. And in fact, if you
Yeah.
look at Notre Dame, it is two towers or two fires.
Oh shit.
And if you look
Yeah, because you
in
have a
here,
fire on each side of the line, and
yes,
the line, with
you have two
the
fires.
yeah.
Remember the saying I said at the beginning,
Hmm.
Idir Gá Tina in Irish means between two fires.
Yeah.
There's two towers again, for this is Notre Dame des Joncs,
Oh,
maybe 100 miles down the road.
every time, Alan. Every
Two
time.
towers. All the way, I found two towers on the Lucifer line, all the way down, two. And what happens? The Lucifer line. So what's happening now?
Mm.
Look at this. This is where the Jesuits started. Indeed, this is where the Knights Templar arrived and formed properly.
Right.
And look it out to sea. And I plotted this coordinates 33 degrees north, 33 degrees east is exactly on the Michael line.
Oh shit.
And what the 33, when you
Huh.
hear them all say 33,
33-degree
from
Mason.
here is a vector, isn't it? It
Mhm.
says we're going down the sunset line. It's part of the sunset line. And they're giving you a vector.
Let
And
me
what's the
guess.
difference here? Everything here is just a single tower.
Oh my
So the
god.
Michael line, they set it with two crosses and they did a single tower. In fact, if I light them all up, I found many Michaels, but all of them are two or single tower.
So basically, we went from at one point worshiping the sun, the light, to now worshiping the moon, representing the darkness.
There's the Byzantine. Remember I said Constantine was
Mm-hmm.
Byzantine? Of Porta Panagia. Panagia was all of earth. So it's the Byzantine church. So it's a power, basically, world order, new world order, and it's a single tower. And I can go all the way back up when you find on the Michael line, it's a single tower. Remember Mount Michael, the single fire they had?
Yeah. Let me guess that
And
lined up with the new tower
and it
in New
ends up
York.
in here is Inish Michelin or Skellig Michael, as they call it. And it is a single fire would have been lit down the end. And see the way this is one harsh island, believe me. When the storm hits here, you know, pardon me, you know about it. And this is
Yeah.
the lit of fire with a high wall to protect it from the southwesterly wind
Oh
to
man.
keep it lit. One fire. And so um so if you look at the towers, so you had the twin towers, and then you have one world tower. And look at that. That's like the eye of Sauron. Sauron
Yeah.
in Sauron is summer in Irish.
Okay. And then in Lord of the Rings,
That's yes, the eye of Sauron.
yeah,
Sauron is summer or sunset. Satan, the eye of Satan, isn't it?
the
And there it
all-seeing eye.
is. And if you look at on top of the one world tower, you have a solar disk. See the aerial on top and has three rings,
Yeah.
or the three inverted crosses if you look at it at a certain angle, and
Oh
it's lined
man.
perfectly with sunset. And I always look at Spotify, and it's a homage to the Illuminati. Every third song album cover is something esoteric symbol.
Hmm.
And in September 9/1, the 20th anniversary was no different. Look at what you see here. You have one world tower, but it looks like it has two wings, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then
And then directly,
upside down cross. Look at it. And then underneath the reflection. Because remember one line, remember I said Star Wars was their Bible.
yeah.
You have Luke Skywalker, you have Rey, you have uh
I
so one is always on top of the other. There's not both of them are never on top. If one is up, the other is down. If
Alan,
one is winning at the other.
I have to give a quick shout out, and I think you would really dig this podcast. You have to go to Conspiracy Kyle. Um,
Okay.
he does he brings Star Wars into modern day, like kind of what you're talking about. That's their Bible. You know, you can take any character, any part of any movie, and it mirrors everything that we're going through. And he does such a great job at breaking everything down about it. And now going back to looking at this picture, you know, as above, so below. Above, right, looking at it, you have the upside down cross, one tower with a wing, but below it, you have the twin towers and everything that is the complete opposite of what is now standing. And the weird thing is, they call it the Freedom Tower. And freedom from what? Freedom from good? So,
Freedom for themselves.
okay, yeah, that too.
But then everything is inverted because it's all about inversion, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
How
what they
fun.
do is they destroy. So as they've been moving up the line, and they have been moving up the line, they were in the penultimate, which is Mount Michael. The only one left, which is probably now, is on this the 21st, the end of the week, is the new order. They'll have destroyed the Luke. Remember, Luke Skywalker disappears because the bad line wins utterly. So the Satan line has destroyed the Lucifer line. So the one tower has destroyed the two towers all the way. And you think of all the movies of, the towers in the two towers, the Dark Tower, the Black Tower, all these tower references have been this Tower Inferno. And then, of course, there is Notre Dame on fire just before all this started when the Gilets Jaunes are getting headway for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then a fire mysteriously happens in the Notre Dame, and Macron is out to save the day. Another destruction of the opposite, nearly the Mount Michael Tower fire. You have the two towers destroyed. So
Unreal. Unfucking real.
So now here I thought, remember I said Sulawan is your one eye, and then I thought Solomon, one eye, and Timple in Irish. Timple, if you see it there in the bottom right, means around in Irish. Timple means around. Temple, I guess it's come to mean temple, around. So I thought that was your eye, and actually your third eye, your podcast, and I still do think, is in fact the Solomon's Temple, your own self. But I thought about it, and I still believe that to a degree. And we've seen the two lines. One is of light, Lucifer line, and the dark, Satan line, and they fight each other. And that kind of represents the chrome.
Man.
And now we go back. Dolmens. I'm sure it's recognizable to all your listeners. So dolmens, we know them as tombs, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
So we look at these. And remember, I said so. Remember, these landed 4,800 BC. They were farmer people. They were sophisticated. They knew how to grow, and they knew the calendars. And the moon was important, and that's how they planted and sowed, and did their food. But they land on Ireland was 95%, 97% covered in deciduous wood, oak and ash and sycamore at the time. And they land, whether it's a wet, uh, temperate climate, but wet all the same. It can be harsh in winter, but so their biggest issue is they're farmers. They would have met the locals, the Baal type people, the antler people, who were hunter gatherers. So they might have done a deal and got food for a bit, but they were farmers, and their biggest trouble is the weather turns bad. And two issues. So you have to clear the land to grow food, and then you harvest your food, but then you need to store your food. And that's true. And you can make a nice timber wood hut, or you could find a cave, and you could do and put your food in it, and that would be may do. But you don't just have to save your food; you have to save the seed for next year too. Because if you don't do that, you're snookered. You have nothing. Now, you can't, timber might be good for a home for shelter and you might get it so good, but for seed, you cannot get one drop of water on your seed or you are snookered. It won't germinate and you need to keep it. The other issue is you need to keep it out of the sun. So putting it in a stone over the top isn't enough. You have to surround it with stones to keep the light out. And there may have been mud and everything up against these as well to keep the seed dark. And so the tomb was kind of almost like, well, what's a rhyme? What rhymes with tomb? A womb. It was a womb for your seed. And it was actually, they weren't for bodies, they were for holding your seed and your food, mostly your seed to keep it safe. And that's
Holy sh!
why a tomb was so important. In fact, look at the way they were all over the world. There you have Spain, Ireland, India, Israel,
And
and they look.
then you move to America, and we built root cellars.
Well, you have dolmens in the U.S. There's Montana,
Mm.
South Korea, and you have Japan. In fact, they were like the womb, but they weren't. They weren't. They were nature's womb, weren't they? Nature's tomb.
Yeah.
They were like. Well, they were a box shape, wasn't it? They were a box. In fact, they were indeed a cube, and they were the dark cube because that's where you would have kept your seed safe and dry. Dark and dry cube. That's what the cube was. And they landed on the west coast of Ireland, and land isn't as good as it is on the east where Newgrange is. And the land got more fertile, and they got the knack of it, growing their food as they moved across the country. And then they ended up with surplus food, which never happened in nature before that with the hunter gatherers. Had to hunt all the time, so they had time to make their their food. So to make their cube better. In fact, your cube was incubator, wasn't it? That's incubator is where you put your baby when you
Yeah.
take it from the mother. It's the artificial or nature or the or other mother. Um, and the tomb we associated with burying didn't come to much later because they were brought the bodies into the tomb because the idea is with the solstice or the key dates that they would be born again or they'd be reincarn as in a cairn where they burned the fires, reincarnated. They would come back through the lights of the fire, and that came later. They wanted to be born and given life like the seed, basically to be reborn in the womb or the tomb.
Oh my God.
And
Ah.
when they got to Newgrange, they did it even more because Newgrange, they gave it a belly and they made the earth pregnant.
Yeah.
In fact, they made it was Mother Nature. And if you look at the stories, Mother Earth, conceived by the touch of the Son of God through the breath, gave birth to the bread of life. I got that quote from somewhere, but look at what you're seeing here. By the touch of God. Remember the hands that were on the ray of the
Mm-hmm.
sun? It goes through the top roof box into
And
the middle, invigorates the seed in the winter solstice so that it germinates properly. This is a
if you
pregnant
look at
mother.
that, yeah, and if you look at the opening and with a little bit of imagination, it's a vagina.
Yes. And what this is, so it is Dianu or Gianu, the Tua Dianu, and Diana, the deity of fruitfulness, fertility, the night, the moon. That is Diana. This is Diana. You were looking at it here. And we called our moon in Irish. Remember, I said another word for moon is Ray.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Ray, and it's our moon, not the one in the sky. It's the one below, not the one above. It is my in Irish is moi, mo or moi, Moire. It's Moira, and Moira is the Irish for Mary.
Mm. So none of this has to do with
And well, it's the
what
ultimate inversion. They inverted the whole story,
they did.
and that is the ray coming through. And there's the Tara brooch, but the Tara brooch is the moon. Look at it, and then the spear, the
And then
luach. the spear of Luog, the moon spear of light, or the god that comes through.
And then what's coming to mind right now is Ray, a drop of golden sun.
Yes,
That little jingle
yes.
that you, I guess,
Do a
condition.
deer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do
and
re mi
that's
fa
it.
sol la ti.
So what they did was they inverted even the whole church. They inverted because the story of the seed, the lamb. Remember, Jesus was the Lamb of God, the bread of life. They said in Christianity, and it was in the cube. And what it was. Remember, Messiah is the prophet, but Mespa is the tower, or is the cube, is the dark cube as well. That's what the cube is all about, is the womb. And so what they did was they inverted the story of the seed and fertility, and then personified it, inverted it from nature to matter or mother, to personified as Mary, and literally threw that church in the middle and flipped it over from Ireland to the Holy Lands, or actually weren't the Holy Lands. The Holy Lands were that part of Meath.
Hmm.
And now you
So
have the Tara brooch that represents, look at it, it's the old moon.
yeah.
That was dug up, very ancient.
Now
And then you have the history of the Old Testament is the history of Atlantis. And that was a quote from Comyns Beaumont, who believed that the Egyptians came from Ireland. And if you look at the word for Noah, the closest Irish word is Nua, which means new. Neo is new. Then it's new. Noah, Nua, Neo are all the beginning of a new time. And look at here is a Nua boss. Nua is new and boss is death in Irish. And who meets you in Egyptian? A Nubos. Nubus is a new death. And that new death is the dog head of Anubis. And then you have the Broiter Horde, and the Broiter Horde was found 100 BC. So you have Noah or Nua, the new age, who landed on the boats in this Iron Mountains, and you have this golden boat buried up in Derry. And here's one. Remember Mother Nature. Na is de in Irish, another way for saying like on, na. And cheer is country or the ground or land or the earth. The na cheer is nature, is mother matter. Matter is to materialize the sun, is to make light energy real and matter. From mother is to make it matter. And then mother nature, nature, mother of the earth. That's the Irish translation.
so basically the Bible
Yes.
is just a great story ripped off from passed down oral traditions.
It would see when you see that the story has been inverted. Yes.
And then you hear talk now that what if the God of the Bible was actually Satan? Because that God, I don't necessarily want to go into that, but yeah.
Well, put it this: one is a story. It doesn't mean there isn't a divine source. It doesn't
Right.
mean
There is a creator.
Life itself is divine, and whatever your belief system, there's no doubting that.
Correct. And
something miraculous happens somehow, or something fantastic.
And if the Bible is something that you want to believe in, that gives you that sense of security to ascend when you die, by all means believe it. If that makes you a good person, believe it.
Yes.
And that goes with any religion. I just
exactly. It's and
when
it
you
is,
start uncovering the truth, like what you've done, it makes more sense to. I guess I'm struggling for the right words to say because I don't want to piss anybody off, but
No, it's.
to
I'm not saying this is an absolute, but there's
right.
definitely questions,
Yes.
and it doesn't challenge the divine being or
No,
anything of that. This just is laying bare some things we have to deal with one way or another.
absolutely. Because,
Um,
you know,
and I'm not saying what I found is correct or not. It's just it's it's a lot to take in, I guess. Even
uh,
for me, looking at even now, it's still a lot to kind of register, and
this is
I don't know what to do with it. To be honest, it's a profound, really. It's
it,
profound.
absolutely, because this is now you've shown me more, but this is, I believe, the third or fourth time we've actually sat down and went like the beginning um, presentations and what have you. I was like, I already saw this. No, my listeners haven't. And I'm like, yes, I remember this. I remember this, and I remember this. And then all of a sudden, you, you're going and going and going, and I'm just like, holy fuck! Here he goes
Yeah,
again, blowing my fucking mind eh, to a point where I'm gonna go to bed with a headache, but a good headache,
yeah,
thinking about the truth and how every government across the world somehow knows this but wants to keep it from us, the common people,
mm,
and here you are. It started with one question from your youngest son,
my oldest, yeah,
or
is
yeah, your oldest, and here you are, and it just kind of like the night, you know you sat there and explained where water came from. It just that and that's what I love about you, Alan, is you take a question and you'll find the answer, but if that answer does not fully satisfy you, you keep digging until you get it. And your work your work isn't done, because everything that you've uncovered up to this point and continue to blow my mind, and I'm sure it's going to blow my listeners' mind. You're going to 2 weeks from now, you're going to be like, "Hey, Ghost, I found something new," and I'm gonna be like, "Oh, Alan, what is it?" And then you and I bounce ideas back and forth and da 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 da, and then I get a headache because you know I'm more of a simpleton, it, but I understand where the direction goes, and my thing is I can't I can't articulate it the way you do, and the way you're articulating it is perfect, because it leads to a way of people getting answers, but also able to research on their own, like you have, to see if what they're questioning is what you're finding. I- if you know what I mean.
yeah. Yeah, all of us have that. In fact, that's probably when we get the other side of events today. I would like to think of a world where people do investigate and help each other to go on their own journeys, but rather than be led down a garden path or a golden path, or the wrong path, let's say, our own path, let's say.
Yeah.
How about that? Our own path. But I still have more I can share, that-
All right.
which you'll see. So, nature, nature, the country, mother nature. And there you have Caduceus, the staff of Caduceus, which is the WHO, isn't it? And look at it, the rod of Asclepius and Caduceus. And look at it, you see two serpents. Remember the paths, the infinity? There's quite a few repeating though. And then you have the staff and you have the wings. And we established the wings early on. The angel, angel, means the anga, the ray of the light on the horizon. And that the wings are in fact the cross, the original cross, the Bridget's cross, the wreathed cross that I showed you at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then there's Baphomet.
Mm.
And Baphomet, again, you see it there. He's transgender. And look at he's pointing above, as so above as below. Remember, the moon is above and the moon is below. Look at the two horns. Do you remember the horns? Remember Capricorn?
Mm-hmm.
Was it Isis or Osiris? And look at there's the horns, or the two horns, or the two fires, aren't they?
Yeah.
And then the sun is the fire in the middle. And actually, there you have the pentagon is actually pointing. One is May Day, isn't it? It's pointing where I would say um, sunset on the 1st of May, and there's sunrise on the 1st of May.
Mm.
This one is pointing down to to um, winter solstice, sunrise. And this is winter solstice, sunset. Okay, and then here is Caduceus again,
Mm-hmm.
and his penis, and then he has breasts, and then there's angel wings or angels. Remember, angel is
Mm.
just telling you it's the light. So that's pretty much that one in a nut. And now this gets interesting. So look here, you have the dragon and then the lion. Richard the Lionheart and St. George kill the dragon, don't they? They're
Right.
opposing it. And you have the sun, which is in Egypt, where they were chasing sunrise. And then you have the moon, which we now know is Newgrange, which is her, and then the sun is him.
And it forms the infinity.
And then there's the infinity of the Hill of Tara, where the King of Kings is coronated. And look at it. So we're going to have a good look at this. So you go around, and it's pretty much exactly the way laid out, isn't it? This one is
Mm-hmm.
above the other one, and it goes around and around. What did I say the Irish for around was? I'll come back to it. So you've seen the picture before of the moon and the sun. So which one is which? Well,
Well, the
this
bigger
is
one would be the sun.
the bigger one is the sun. That's right, the southeast down in Egypt. And here's the moon Newgrange up in the northwest of Europe.
Hmm.
See that? And what are you looking at here? This is the moon. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's the moon, and this is the infinity that goes around. Remember, I said to round is chimpel in Irish. Chimpel,
Yeah.
chimpel. This is the moon. This is the mon. This is the sun. This is the sol. This is Solomon's temple.
Oh, shh.
This is Solomon's temple.
And here everybody thought that he actually built a big castle and it was in Israel somewhere. And, oh, we got to go to Solomon's temple. Here you are showing this, Saul. Come on. Oh.
Yeah, as Michael Desarian rightly said, mono is on your own, and solo is on your own.
Uh-huh.
And
Wow.
do you remember? Do you remember Star Wars again? Because I'll come back to it. So there's something very profoundly wrong here. So if I just escape for a minute, and I go all the way up to Tara, and I show you, okay? There's a real wrong being done, a real crime. A crime that's going to be undone and going to change the world. So this is the Hill of Tara, as I said. And in it, you have the Stone of Destiny. Wait a second. There is the Stone of Destiny. And what it is in fact, it's a penis, isn't it? It's a phallic symbol, isn't
I
it?
remember you and I talking about this one night, and I said, what if that
It's
is
not. Yep.
penis?
Yep, definitely is that. And that I have a problem with, because that is here. In fact, not only did they put the penis on the female, the Mother Earth, literally, We've now, Mother Earth is Newgrange on the moon, the Earth moon, and there they've put a penis there, where in fact it should be here,
Mhm.
because the moon is male. And in fact, I worked out then that um, I worked out too that if it was there, then on a certain sunrise, the shadow of the stone of destiny would shine this way. Because Leah fall, do you know what is actually stone translated? Stone of destiny. Leah is, if you look at one translation, means stone cast. In other words, the shadow of the stone. And Leah is also the color of the grey or aluminium or the color of the moon. In fact, remember, Leah is another word for the moon. And as well as Ray. And fall is the destiny, but fall is also where the word fall comes from. That's where it's cast, but it's also phallic. So Leah fall is the stone cast shadow, and what it is that it what it is that it casts itself onto the moon. And what I figured was that that happens when the Sun Calc app, sorry, is on the 1st of February. That's when it lines up perfectly one with the other. And what's significant about that? In Ireland, that is the first day of spring, of new growth, of fertility. And that is, in fact, St. Bridget's Day. Remember St. Bridget's Cross that at the beginning? And bridge is probably where the word comes from, because what happens is as the sun rises, to the southeast on St. Bridget's Day, the 1st of February, the stone casts a shadow to whoever is to be coronated. And whoever is to be coronated, the sunlight will make its way over the top and light on them. So, in fact, I said there was one stone of destiny, but in reality, there is two stones of destiny. This is the Leah Fall, and the other is the seating stone where the king, which king could have been man or woman of the day, mostly men, but it wasn't decided. The king would sit here on the seating stone, and the beam of light at sunrise on St. Bridget's Day, the 1st of February, the 1st of spring in Irish tradition, the sun would come over the top of the phallic and light upon the new king on the 1st of February. And how I know this? So we all know of Braveheart. Remember I said Longshanks, and we remember Robert the Bruce.
Right.
His brother was Edward the Bruce, and he was the last High King of Ireland. He came and invaded Ireland, and there was lots of bad stories about what happened. The first scorched earth policies, famine, pillaging, etc. He wasn't particularly, the stories don't bode well for him. But he died in battle against King Edward I's army, Longshanks' army, north of Dublin in February. In other words,
Hmm.
he must have been coronated just before. And what's just north of Dublin? Half an hour is Tara Hill, the Hill of
Oh,
Tara.
shit.
So he was coronated on the 1st of February. So he knew back then, that was about 1300. They knew that the 1st of February, and I think all the new mandatory stuff is coming in on the 1st of February or 2nd. The new coronated, and this is where they go on the 1st of February as the stone goes over the pins and lights on the shoulder. And in fact, this is what happens. The stone beam goes over the top, and as it would move from east to west, it would land on the right shoulder first, the beam of light over the top, and move onto the left shoulder, just like the sword does when the queen or king is coronated
Yes.
on the coronation stone, the sword. And look at the coronation stone is the seating stone. So it was stolen from Tara, and
Mm.
it is the seating stone. And this is the stone, the Leafal, and it gave birth. And what actually happens is that the new king is the son of the sun, and or the child is the child of the sun and the moon. So let's go to the recent Star Wars. Who's the baddie? It's Kylo Ren. But if you change the phonics, and it's not a kicking ka, it says cha, it's children, children
Oh my God.
of Hans Solo and Princess Leia, which I said was another word for the moon.
Mm-hmm.
So it's literally telling you. And look at St. Bridget's Day is the 1st of February because the shadow and the beam bridge across the ditch between the two circles.
That's amazing. Like,
And
oh
there
my,
you can see there's 2 meters, which would work out exactly for the pitch of the sun between the two. I took a section elevation to see how that would work. And I did it from the coast, and there's a rise up. So this is an island, Hoth Island here.
huh.
But either side of it, the sun would easily pitch up at about 8 degrees. And so it's not quite, it's about 1.43 meters, but it would light up onto the other. There's Tara up at the top here. So it's quite a difference.
Unreal.
Um, and so finally, this is so basically that stone needs to move back to the right circle, and the coronation seating stone needs to be moved back into the moon circle. And then we need, for everyone to know that, is to know that we've been lied to on everything and that we are utterly and profoundly controlled. So I'll show you, I'll just escape and I'll show you one thing that is equally. So let me show you this. So the Queen came to Ireland and she visited down here to Cashel. She visited um, what we call, bear with me, is the Rock of Cashel. There. Oops. Right there. It's just being a little glitchy on me. And when I looked at it, here is the Rock of Cashel. So let me just turn on the points. So it's in here. Cashel is in here. There you go. Nope, sorry. It's here's Cashel. And let me tell you about this place. Here is the Rock of Cashel. So her whole family, since the formation of the Republic of Ireland, since the cut the throat of the baby child that is the shape of Ireland, the formation of the state, no royal family had been until she came in about 2013, about the time of the G8 meeting in 2013, thereabouts, plus or minus. And she had to go to the Rock of Cashel. And the Rock of Cashel is where the High King of Munster, which is the south of Ireland, is coronated. And I thought about it and I said, it's very interesting. I said I have to look at that. I said, just bear with me till I get all of this up to speed. So I just thought it was strange. So there is the Rock of Cashel. For some reason it's not. Let me turn off all the points. My map is acting strange. So I did.
This usually happens when you start hitting really close to the truth.
Well, there's the rocket cache. So I says I draw a circle, and I pulled a circle, and I says I bet you this splits the two lines, and I pulled it down to make a tangent on the Michael line, as you can see. And I says I wonder does it hit Tara or Newgrange on the other end, but it doesn't. It goes in the middle. In fact, when I looked at it to see where it went to, and I zoomed in, this is a landfill. This is a landfill in Meath for recycling, owned by the state, okay? The council or the state. And I looked, they have a mound here. And this is what I've seen. That 200-mile diameter circle cuts through this anomaly here.
Oh,
Do you see it?
yeah.
Exactly. Which is just, if I turn it off, look at the lines. That's the circle. And then I did a line,
That's a compass.
and I pulled that line there. And where does it go? It goes right back to Tara.
Oh my.
And then I says I'd have a look at this line. So I says, well, do you know what? When I'm at it, I'll pull a line from Newgrange through Tara, and it shoots on down here. And last year, on the 3rd of March, the 3rd of the 3rd, 2020, there was a visit, unusual visit, into this little national school here, right on this line between Newgrange and Tara. There's a little children's school, you can see it here, tiny little school. And who visited them? William and Kate.
What does that school of Dunsay?
Dunsany. It's the
Dunsany?
name of the village,
Okay.
County Meath. And that's where they visited on the line.
So there's this saying out there, and I'll butcher it, so I'm just going to put it in ghost terms. The people in control of power rely on astrology and astrotheology, and the people that are going to get rich think about it or something. You know what I mean? So all these world leaders, and especially over there with like the Queen, who is German from descent, not really English at all. But all these world leaders, and you could even tie Joe Biden into it, as dumb as he fucking
Well, I
looks.
have
And
I've tied him into the G7 in Mount Michael.
yeah, they know about all this shit. But
I'd say on their handlers do. They're only puppets.
Right.
Yeah. So there could be that excuse that they don't know. They're just doing what they're told.
Right. But at the end of the day, it's getting put right in front of our face.
Yeah.
And if you would have never presented this to me or my audience, nobody would ever think to look at it in that aspect.
Yeah.
And there was a saying, symbolism will be their downfall, that whole Q-tard thing, what have you. But in actuality, everything that they do symbolize and go to these ancient places, and it's for a reason. And they believe in that reason because in my mind, in a good way, that is the actual truth. You have the line of Michael and the line of but yeah, it's just I don't even know what to say. Like, just sitting here, I'm like, I have so many questions, but my brain cannot even
Yeah.
it wants to spit out 17,000 questions in no
Yeah.
order at all. You know what I mean?
What's William and Kate's children's name? What's their two boys' names?
That I don't know because I don't pay attention to them.
Well, I didn't, but I do now. Do you know what their children's name is?
Hmm.
George and Nui.
Oh my. Oh, are
Do you
you
know who
fucking
created Star Wars?
George Lucas, George Louis,
Mhm.
motherfuckers.
So,
Oh my
so that
god.
that is a massive task, and so they went there. They probably were up at Tara that night, sunset, to get coronated William to be the new leader. Uh,
Unbelievable.
yeah, and so I'll continue, I guess. So there's no doubt that it needs so the mission is that stone needs to move back to Tara. In fact, so so there's a legend that says when so it's a book, I think it's the book of prophecies of Burcon, which is of the High Kings of Ireland and Scotland. And the prophecy is a couple of thousand years old, I believe. My brother read it maybe 10 years ago or so. And what it says is that when the sword of light, the spear of Luach, spelt like my son, is found, when the Leah fall, the stone of destiny, is found. Well, we found it. We found the two of them. There's two, not one. One is the phallic and one is the seat. The sword of light is the coronation, the light over the Leah fall, the shoulder to shoulder. That's the sword of light to coronate. When the spear of Luog, which is the spear of light, goes through the light roof box of Newgrange, and it goes in to the pot of plentiful is the cube of Newgrange. When those are found, the world will be freed from slavery, and it will be found by a son of Breffni, and that's where I was born.
Mm. Oh, now I see where you were. Oh, man,
So
you hinted at so much over the past few months, and holy,
yeah,
I have no words out. Like,
that's the prophecy that I listen. I don't. I just want them. I want it over.
right.
That's all I want, more than all of us. So I'll go to one more thing now.
It's amazing
Uh,
how they just hide this shit.
yes, it really is. So now here you have the two arcs. The two arcs. Remember, it's a promise to repeat, 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 isn't it? But actually, what they are is the two angels, angel of the covenant. They're the arcs of the covenant. And there is the sun and the moon. And what they do is bridge on, say, Bridget's Day.
Oh my god.
And the bridging gives you the seal of Solomon,
Oh, oh my god.
because that's exactly what it is. And
Unreal.
look at it's Tau and Ta Ra. Ra is not God. Do you know what God it is? Remember, we learned the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Ra is the word. It's a statement in ancient Irish, to etymology.
Right.
It means the word. And Ta is correct. It means the true word. Torah. The hill of Torah is the hill of the true word.
Or the hill of truth.
And the Torah is, well, the ancient Bible, isn't it?
Mm. Oh my God. They stole everything and then
Yes.
manipulated it and then made
So,
us believe a certain way as they're going a different way.
yes.
And all it did was enslave every person on the earth.
So there you have the Aten, the sun or the moon or the Jupiter or sunset, sunrise, and you have the two servants of the path of each line, haven't you? And then it dawned on me. I showed you this the rod of Caduceus.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look,
Whoa.
and that remember the rock of Cashel where the Queen visited in Ireland?
Yeah.
You pull a line, and where does it go through? Cern in Switzerland.
Huh.
And then it goes through the line in Sorrentino. Remember the line that bisects the lines on the Mediterranean side? And there you have Mount Sinai and Petra, and they make the wings. And that is the rod of Caduceus.
Unbelievable.
And there is Caduceus. In Irish, it means atonement.
Huh.
An atonement is the action of making amends for a wrong or an injury.
Yep.
But that's the injury to Akhenaten and the wrong. And this is their revenge.
Oh my God. And then you brought up CERN and they have a
Yeah.
statue of Shiva.
Yeah.
And they do this weird dance. That's a whole nother subject for
I've seen.
another episode. But yeah, holy shit.
And you can break Ka means the where. And Ducus, another way of breaking Caducus, it means hereditary right or claim, birthright, heritage, ancestral estate, patrimony. Sound like they fit? So they've double word, double meaning.
Which ties in as above, so below.
Yes. And that is that.
Holy shit. Alan, I can't wait to see what more of your work uncovers. This alone, it, it it's so hard to describe because
There's a lot to take in, isn't there? There really
yes,
is a lot of information.
so much to the point where everything that you were taught growing up, no matter what religion or non-religion, folklore, whatever, all of a sudden you're like, huh, so this is where it all began. This is where they wanted to go, and this is where they're taking us now.
Mm-hmm.
And now is not a good thing. And I can see why like in the Christian religion, they with Revelation, it's the end times, it's the end times. Well, it's the end times began when they went on to the Lucifer line,
Yeah.
and it's been going. and it will continue to go until they go back up and cross back over and go back into the Michael line.
Yeah. Well, they're so now they're at the end. They're here.
Mm-hmm.
They're moving, and I think the next few days it's faster than we thought. And this is the reset. It's the real great reset. Is they
Right.
get to this Inishmikaleen, and then they can reset at Tara on the 1st of February, the bridging day,
And then,
and then begin the Lucifer reign,
yep.
which is Louis and George.
Yeah. Oh my
It's a
God.
script. What you're
It
looking
is.
at is a script.
That keeps being replayed
Repeated.
and replayed and repeat.
Yeah.
Like you said, repeated. Um,
Only
but
well,
it also ties in with like astrotheology. Like every so many thousand years, a new sign comes into power. So when they reset this, is that the true time we move into the age of Aquarius? Or are we, or have we been in the age of Aquarius, the age of man?
well, we're in it now. We were in it last winter solstice last year.
Okay.
That's when Pisces ended and Aquarius
Mm-hmm.
began on the 21st of December. And now this is the rebirth, the reset. And so they were down in Antarctica, weren't they? Um, Klaus Schwab and what do you call her from the IMF, um, Lagarde, uh, and Khan. A few of them were all down, proper good Satanists, you know. So I mean, this is their script, but it's not our script.
Correct.
And the power is that if that stone moves in Ireland, because as I said, it has massive significance to the Irish people, even more so than nearly, and you know how strong Catholicism and Christianity is in Ireland.
Mm.
But this is the only thing that probably could penetrate that strength is the ancient stories of Tara. And to know that the stone is in the wrong place, well, they'll go around and you can imagine, what do you mean the stone is in the wrong place? In fact, not only is it in the wrong place, they put it on. Remember, this is the sunset line,
Yeah, they put it on the wrong line.
but they put it on the sunset side of the center of the moon, so that on sunset, a shadow would be cast to the center of the moon. So
Hmm.
almost like asexual. It's all
Right.
transgender.
Yeah.
They transgendered Baal to become Baphomet. They transgender everything, and the moon is just not, they desexualized nature. In other words, this is their
That
finger up to the source.
that's the plan to move us all back to, you know, angels or angles were hermaphrodites. They weren't male or female. They,
Yes,
but somehow they were able to reproduce
yes.
with humans. But
Without
yeah,
love,
yeah. Wow.
and this is their game. So, for the Irish people to know that this stone is in the wrong place, first of all, there'll be, what are you on about? There'll be rejection. That can't be. But the curiosity, because it's too powerful, this story in Ireland to the people. It's too powerful, and for them not to find out why. And to
Right.
find out why that stone is in the wrong place is to find out.
All of that.
And it's not just if Ireland finds out with the diaspora and the whole world finds out.
It does, because that was the original quote unquote old world. You know what I
And
mean?
that's
Like,
another prophecy is Ireland will free itself first,
I hope so.
and then
I
the
hope.
world will free it after. And I get a buzz
Unreal.
even telling you now. But I just, with this evil for so many thousands, a whole eon, a whole epoch of evil.
Mm,
So yeah,
man.
um, as evil is the opposite of life. Live. the inversion of live,
It is.
and everything is they've inverted the story and personified it from nature and everything. So I'm looking forward to this, and yeah, no, I'm
Absolutely.
delighted to get to share it with you on their show.
And,
Goes.
and that just reaffirms my spiritual journey for the last year and a half to 2 years of getting back to nature and knowing the, the creator and every religion. I, I I don't care if it's Celtic, Norse, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Mormon. Yeah, I mean the list goes on. It it's all it's all bastardized to a point where you know they want you to almost in a sense worship something that isn't natural. I
Yeah.
mean, that's just my opinion. If I'm wrong, please.
Oh, I don't think you. I think you've absolutely nailed it. It's anti-nature.
Hmm.
That is what it is, and anti-nature is anti-divine or
Yes.
divine, and that's what it's all about. This is the ultimate. What they want. Transhumanism is fits the agenda perfectly because it's the ultimate to infinity. They want everyone, it's and that's why it,
Hmm.
they've put their hands up now. Um, I don't. I'd love to see them try and explain this away.
Yeah, exactly. Now, are you done sharing your screen, or
Yes, I'll stop share.
then we can?
There you are.
Hey, there you are. Look,
There I am.
look at that handsome Irishman.
If you find a handsome Irishman, I'm happy with that. It's not here anyway. It's not tonight. But no, I'm
Hey,
delighted.
our wives think that we're handsome, so that's all that matters.
Well, maybe yours does. I don't know, but mine is
Yeah,
probably having second thoughts now at this stage.
yeah, I'm
But
pretty sure mine is too.
it's all, it's all good. No, I'm absolutely delighted at this stage. I got to share it with you. Like, well, you know the story. As I say,
Mm,
you've seen it grow as well. You've seen it from the beginning almost, and
yes, and
you,
and
you know,
that's why I have to apologize to my listeners. That's why for the beginning, I wasn't asking questions, and I probably should have, but I'd seen a lot of this, and I knew the more you talked, it would answer any question that you had. So, you know,
yeah.
y-
It's the
then you
funny is
presented
of
new information, and I'm just like, okay, I think I need to ask some questions.
I think that's about where I'm at. I'm looking at other stuff, obviously. Um,
Absolutely.
but the main concern is to get this story now and out. And I think the time and serendipity, um, it's a lot of information, and I honestly can't explain how I've been lucky enough to find it for us. But it is what it is, and we need to make use of it now. So I guess that's why we were destined to meet. I guess over
Lines
the
of,
airwaves.
yep, lines
And
of
now
destiny.
you're exactly you're destined to bring it further to your audience, and yeah, it's I just hope it does what I think it will do.
I'm
And I
sure it
know it
will.
will do. Yeah, I know it will. Actually, I know it. I don't believe it. I know it.
Hmm.
So it's yeah, it's a
Why don't
good
you
day for us.
tell people where they can find you on Telegram with your real history? Poetry.
Yeah, so on Telegram, if you just look up real history, literally, you'll find the group, and yeah, you're welcome to join. As I say, every topic is there's no topic sacrosanct. Everything is discussed. It goes every way, and I guess the intention was I set the group up was just an accident, really. I was told, why I says, why don't you share that information? And I got told, why don't you set up a group for it yourself?
Hmm.
and then with the information I was finding out, I thought, wouldn't it be great to have a group where we could actually establish a real timeline of history? And lots of debate, lots of stuff. Like all good debates, you can't agree with everything, but it's interesting to still have a look at it. And isn't that the definition of true enlightenment, is to explore the counter opinions, and with an open mind, and move forward. And that's what we've been
Absolutely.
denied throughout history. So yeah, it's good.
And I have to apologize. I haven't been checking in to Telegram as much as I used to, or or any actual social media. Just because starting this podcast up and trying to get good guests and great guests such as yourself on the show, so information can be shared. But I do pop in from time to time and scroll down on all the messages that are there. Sometimes it might be like 50 or 100, but I sit there and I scroll and reading them. Oh man, you know, people
Yes.
from and that's what I love about Telegram, is because you connect from, I'm here in the United States, you're in England, originally from Ireland, and we connected about a year ago and have become really good friends and close friends, and l- always look forward to talking with you. Like, y-
Yeah.
you enlighten me, and I hope my
Same.
dumbass can enlighten
Not
you.
at all. I love the stuff you have now. I love your
But
shows as well. But we're
it
all
just
there. It's a great share, isn't it?
it
It's
is.
um it's a true. We're not getting information on mainstream,
No,
so
and we
so
never will.
never will.
That everything like that propaganda.
Yeah,
So,
it's gone.
well,
But
I will I will close this out with thank you for joining another episode. I apologize to the listeners for not asking a super ton of questions or interacting, but the reason why is because Alan needed to get his information and his studies out there. And if I interrupted every 2 seconds, every 30 seconds, every minute, 5, 10, whatever, it would have chopped it up to the point where you, as the listener, would not have been able to get the information and retain. I did ask a couple questions on stuff that was kind of new to me, and towards the end, everything was new to me, and I have to go to bed at some point tonight and think about what Alan drilled into my head as your host, and think and revel in it in a good way, because the information is beautiful and always needs to be put out there. So having said that, I will sign off, and I'm going to start a new thing because everybody has a catchphrase out there, and my catchphrase for my entire life, I usually use my real name, but what Ghost says. So if you know what that means, and if you don't, email me, hit me up on all the major socials, and make sure you check out Alan's page on Telegram, because the information out there is amazing. Uh, you would be astonished at thinking that you're alone, having one frame of mindset of a belief, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, there's people out there that think just like me, maybe on a higher level, maybe on the same level. It doesn't matter, but are willing to engage and talk to you and enlighten you. So having said that, be safe, and thanks for listening.